following Meshtastic for um I guess probably over a year now, and initially just started playing with the devices, and then later kind of got my feet wet in modifying some of the code personally, and didn't really contribute to the project for a while. Just mostly things like the is always powered stuff. Putting my own little private builds out for that, particularly for these little T Laura guys. Because those were problematic. But uh just recently started, I guess, ramping up more in my contributions to the project as a whole. Um but I very much enjoy like the environmental plugin stuff right now. That's been fun. The measurement plugin. Because that was one that I had kind of seen it on the periphery of the project and not really delved into it because it seemed a little bit more complicated. But yeah.
Cool. Welcome.
Yeah, I'll go. I'm an outsider. I'm just enjoying the innovation that's happening from the outside. Just a lot of technology, a lot of people innovating. And it's pretty inspirational for me just being an outsider, just seeing what new technology you guys are able to bring to the forefront, thinking about what what are the potential use cases is pretty exciting for me as an outsider. So I don't commit anything. I'm not a high speed developer, but I'm a great lurker. Props to all you guys.
And I'm not getting names here because I don't have my participant list up. Who are you?
Nickname's Kempo. I don't know.
Ah, right on.
Just a rando dude on you guys' Discord.
Rando. Hey, that's your new name.
I'll take it.
Take it. Awesome. Welcome.
Great cases, by the way.
I'll jump in. You guys probably see me around a fair bit on Discord. Sasha Weatherstone. When I'm not off grid. Got a wide array of hobbies. That's why I kind of like Meshtastic, because you can kind of integrate like 6 or 7 major fields and sort of stretch your wings and exercise your experiences with all of those. I work for the Department of Defense, and thankfully I have lots of spare time, so projects like this mesh pretty well with my work life. Yeah.
Welcome. I'll go. J.M. Castler. I'm here in San Francisco and scuba diving, photography, kayaking, music festivals, Burning Man. I just love making things mechanical, electrical, software, and I love Meshtastic because I don't code or make anything for my day job anymore. I really don't do any of this. And so this just reminds me of what fun I used to have. So, quick little bit.
I'm Garth. I have probably been using Meshtastic for about a year. Did some work on the discourse with Ben, building various solar-powered things, and then at some point I got sick of carrying around a second phone, so I started work on the iOS app. So that's been probably the last 4 or 5 months for me mostly. And my family has a house that doesn't have real great cell service and is surrounded by forest land. And so during COVID, I've been hiking along those forest roads a lot and sort of figuring out a system so that my parents can tell that the children and grandchildren are still moving, essentially. So yeah, that's what I've been using it mostly for. It's been a lot of fun recently with a lot of new features. I think we have a lot of great things that are at like 90%. And we've been getting a lot of them figured out the last sort of 10%, get it actually working so more users can use it and contribute and provide bugs and stuff. So it's been a lot of good activity recently.
Welcome.
I'll hop in. I'm Foster Irwin, JF Irwin on Discord, and I started using Meshtastic about a year ago, maybe a little over, and it was kind of a struggle to find the documentation because it was scattered throughout all of the different repos, and so I made a big push on that like about a year ago, and then kind of fell off the grid. But I've found some more spare time now, and I'm back and ready to help with the documentation to make it easier for other people to use it. And yeah, so me.
Awesome. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. So I just got some fun stats. Not too many here, but call it out. What do you think this number is? Anyone?
I'll be the first guy to make a fool of myself. It's probably the number of commits or pushes to the Git repo.
Days since developer day.
Well, now I feel like a butthole.
The next ones are Git related. There's your hint. So almost 2 years since we all got together.
Wow.
And yeah, I didn't realize it took that long. All right, 13. What's 13? Guesses?
New repos.
Aha! We have 13 repos. That is correct. Now this is across repos. What are these?
One of them stars. There we go.
Yep.
Pretty impressive.
And I'm not gonna make a puzzle out of this. This is just really cool. 23 contributors to Android, 28 to the website. Got something new coming around called the GUI installer, named TBD. 4 contributors, 92 to the device, 3 on the Apple app, 17 on Python, 24 on protobufs. I think that one's impressive. 8 on our JavaScript library and 6 on our web client.
That's amazing that we almost have 100 contributors on device.
Yeah. We got something here. Cool. Wanted to share. All right. Hit list. So
Also, that we've got over 1,600 people in the Discord server now.
Wow.
16. I was looking at Sasha brought up, hey, can we put our Discord server onto its own domain name? So I started digging in to find out what it would be to make it, forum.meshtastic.org. And apparently we're using so much traffic on there that if we were not being sponsored by Discord, it would be $300 per month. I mean, that's what our bill would be from them if they weren't giving this to us for free. And if we wanted to get our own domain, that's what we'd have to pay.
Insane.
We've got a lot of traffic on there.
Yeah, we would almost need to host our own sort of matrix server or something like that if we wanted to migrate, but that's a whole mess.
Yep. So here's our hit list. Really broken down into a couple tabs. This first one here are the things that has been suggested need to get done before 1.3. So Mr. Red there suggests we need to get the battery status on the Heltec 1.2 working. We've got flaky GPS and device booting on Serial Connect with Sasha. And Garth is suggesting that we need to figure out the ESP32 initial device failures. I think those are all very, very reasonable. And they're good things to just keep in mind to exit 1.2. I can at least speak for this one about ESP32 device pairing. I have a little prototype device firmware, not specific to Meshtastic, that uses a lot of the out-of-the-box library features of the new Nimble BLE firmware. The one we're using was based on something about 2 years old. So I've got a new one being built out from the latest and greatest. It's a little quirky, but I haven't gotten really any pairing failures at all.
So you're saying you built the pairing completely off of Nimble, the latest Nimble release?
I mean, right now our pairing code is about, I think, 300, 400 lines.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? Because we've re-implemented so much of what's going on. I pretty much just took their sample code and it's like 20 lines.
Oh my gosh.
Let somebody else who knows what they're doing take care of that plumbing for us.
Yeah, and that's the thing that always gets me when I start wading into the Bluetooth code is it's like I don't know how any of this works. This is so some of it's so low level.
Yeah.
It's like I know that Bluetooth exists, but I don't know enough to really understand all the pairing process and security model stuff that's built around it and implementation. So
yeah. So my hope this weekend is to get that sample code. I'll do this in a private branch, merged into our 1.2 code with the from radio and to phone. I think those are the two endpoints. And try the Android app and iOS on that, stubbed out version of Bluetooth. It's not. It's weeks away from being merged in. We use Bluetooth in so many different ways, but at least at the proof of concept, if that works, then we know where the problem is.
sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
I think some progress has been made on the Heltec stuff. At a minimum, I have all the issues all in one now. So I collected together all the assorted battery problems. At some level, I think the same thing that was done for rack, where there's some code that's trying to figure out what the right value is to figure out the charging value is probably what needs to be done for that, which is possible now that we have a variant there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the GPS for the rack, I think I have isolated to 1.2.46 and 1.2.47 as far as there is a host of GPS updates that were done in there that were lightly tested because that was kind of the lowest point of activity at some level, like September 5th or so of this year. And it's essentially a bunch of replumbing of GPS stuff, I think, to better support ATAC. And it seems to have, it's had a number of GPS impacts. So we have there's a bunch of GPS bugs that I think are connected to the plumbing updates in that time range. So
Yeah, and it's interesting that it only affects certain hardware because that I can't remember what the is it the rack 12500 or something like that, the one that
The
has
newer board, yeah.
Yeah, that one actually I can get a lock inside of my house. But the 1910 does not appear to work for anybody right now. And I think
yeah.
there's some issues with the T Echo as well. With their GPS.
Mm-hmm.
That thing's been a nightmare since it's been released.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm at this point. It seems like it's easier to find out what doesn't work than what actually works on it.
Hello, this is Thomas here, Caveman 99. I have been looking into the GPS code and the different branches of GPS code over the last few days. The problem is the thing that we are using is pretty old, and it was modified. It lives in our own repository. So it wasn't heavily modified. There were some corrections, especially regarding the timing or the time recognition from the GPS strings. And I've compared it to what SoftRF are using on the T-Echo, and I compared it to the version 2 library from the library vendor. And this is a complete rewrite. So it's not use comparing sections or trying to figure out what exactly has changed, because absolutely everything has changed. I think the GPS code is I propose we figure out what was changed in our code and why it was changed, and try to port these changes to the new version of the library. Maybe much of the problems we have will be gone then.
Mm-hmm.
Was
Is
that
that
the
Tiny GPS plus?
The GPS code is several layers. The tiny GPS is actually not that different, but it's the I don't remember exactly. I have to look into the issues. I'll come back to it later. I have to look into my notes. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to that GPS code because I think Tiny GPS does some of the actual like extraction of data, but there's a lot of like hardware specific interfaces that work with the because we've got the Neo M6N, M8N, we've got the GLONASS chips from U-Blocks. It's there's a lot of moving pieces.
Thank you for looking into that. That's good insight. So from the top down, I'm going to get volunteers here. Do we have a volunteer to take on the battery status?
I can take a look at that one. I need to actually order at Heltech 2.1 because I don't have any of the Heltec devices right now.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm still not getting names.
Sorry, that's Ben Turn.
Cool. Rackboard Flaky GPS.
I think what's his name? AFGUC has been sort of assisting with that one on GitHub. He's been actively replying to comments and trying to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, his was the commit in question on the
Yeah.
1.246 branch.
I gotta say, that guy's amazing. Just
Yeah, he's a wizard.
like, how did you come up with this? Yeah, really appreciate his work. All right. And device rebooting on Serial Connect.
See, that's a bit of a strange one. I think it may be kind of out of the scope of the device itself because I think a lot of it's to do with the drivers not behaving as they should. But I was wondering if we could possibly maybe be a little more resilient to bad drivers or inconsistent drivers because it's devices are very consistently resetting with specific serial things.
Is it possible that that's something that's happening with Pi Serial? Because I know we've tracked down.
So I've had that happen with multiple OSs, multiple systems, and multiple bits of software and implementations of serial, and even drastically different serial clients.
Interesting.
It seems to be very much client specific. So there was issues with Pi Serial. I've also had like 3 or 4 different serial loggers and whatnot on Windows do the exact same thing.
I mentioned the Pi Serial one because I think it was that was responsible for the T-LoRa V1 boards. When I was using the Meshtastic CLI on a Linux laptop, it would not trigger the long press, but on a Windows, it would trigger the long press, and it had to do with the Pi Serial like fiddling with the reset. I think it was doing something with the
There
the
seems to
UC.
be issues with the clear to send and request to send and various other things,
Yeah.
like operating system to operating system. So
I think we're going to struggle with these chip drivers for probably another year. They're not super quick to integrate those into operating systems. So I think that may be something that we have to contend with for a little while. I know when we were doing the work yesterday for the firmware installer, there's one of those drivers with instructions in Chinese that you have to install in order for serial to even work with the T-LoRa 2.16 and basically any V1 T-LoRa you buy now. And I think those chips will probably be in the operating systems about the time that they run out and some other cheaper chip is used and it has a new driver. So we're probably going to be fighting with this at some level for a little while.
yeah, you look at the state of the drivers for like the most common CH340G, they haven't worked on operating systems and require several versions older editions of the driver. Yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare all around.
I hate to kind of create like a hierarchy of devices, but there's definitely like not all of these boards are created equal for for Meshtastic and for the drivers themselves. I've had weird issues with these T-LoRas that I cannot figure out.
Maybe that suggests we should have a compatibility or support matrix, right? These are the things that we know work really well. These are the things that may have problems.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. It's kind of like a here's the recommended. It's like these are supported, but you're kind of taking more of a risk factor.
I think that'll be good to have a really good push for support with the upcoming rack ESP32 and LoRa modules, because they a lot better manufacturer support with those.
Yeah, I'm going to be working on that. I've got one of the core boards sitting here. I was going to try to integrate. I've got a target for it, but I haven't actually flashed it yet. But that one has the ESP Rover board, I think it is, at the core. So it basically turns the rack baseboard into like a glorified dev board when you put that core in there.
Cool. So listening to this conversation, looks like device rebooting and serial connect, this would be deferred?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it was just more of a nice thing to have, but it seems like there's a couple of other issues we can group under that category.
All right. Good short list. Anything else that we need to do before we switch over to 1.3?
Yeah, and I'll definitely help with the pairing failures there. I think for me, that's kind of a blocker to getting into the app store. I'd like to get that figured out, because right now every first time pairing of a T-Beam or T-LoRa is failing, which is kind of a bad experience. So
And the new firmware I gave you, like, it's consistent, right? It just works.
yeah, there's no pin. So
Yeah.
I guess that's the piece to figure out. But yeah, it has been connecting properly and not failing. So
Only so much you can get out of 20 lines. Sweet. All right.
I think that decision was made initially because the rack is inherently a headless device. You can solder on your I2C headers and plug in an OLED, but I think a lot of people were running it headless, so that was just kind of the shortcut to getting it paired. So it's just kind of persisted. That was my impression, at least, because I seem to remember Kevin just kind of putting that caveat in there that the rack boards were pinless.
yeah, correct.
Yeah, that the user pin button coming about recently, that's a completely a limitation of the hardware in terms of the headers that they expose on the core boards, because they really don't all the stuff that they expose is like ground reset, the I2C stuff, and USB to serial, and that's about it. There's no like general purpose like ADCs type stuff to use on those standard headers. So until they release that IO expansion board, and some of the peripherals like that e-ink display with the buttons, we really didn't have any way of getting that. Yeah, you got the show off. You got the whole kit.
I'm trying to collect one of each so we can test them down the track. I think it was.
I think it'd be good to create a ticket on that so we can brainstorm what the approach would be.
Yeah.
I think there was a bit of talk for off by default and it's enabled, because I think the biggest issue was with people not understanding that there were issues coming from having it enabled. And I think if people have to manually enable it, which isn't necessarily difficult, we can force them to read a blurb saying you may have these issues.
Yeah, if we can control that with a user pref, that would be really easy to just plug kind of into the existing code base. Yeah, and there's precedence for that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but the problem is most users of the rack boards don't have the button set up with IO expansion and everything. I think a lot of folks are just kind of using it either standalone or with the GPS module.
Yeah, I think it should be a configuration, and then we can look at how people are using it. In my debugging of the Bluetooth issues in the iOS app, I wound up finding that people are entering literally the wrong pin about 25% of the time. And if we're not necessarily managing that, I was just crashing for a while, which was exciting. And I'm not sure we're managing that super well everywhere. So I didn't realize there were so many failures to enter the right pin. And then I've talked to some people with glasses and stuff that have said that they have a ton of trouble with Bluetooth devices and pins and stuff. So I'm not sure what the perfect solution is, but it definitely has some issues that I think we hadn't quite weren't totally seeing before. I think a lot of times people get a device paired and then don't really remember later how bad the initial experience getting the device paired was. I think in a lot of cases on both Android and iOS, when I've been forgetting devices and then repairing them recently, the experience has not been very good. So
Not to completely derail the conversation, but something that's occurred to me lately with the rack boards in particular and their lack of easily implemented buttons, it would be nice to expose some of the operations like the screen toggling. I know I implemented that feature that does the auto carousel type thing, but it would be interesting to actually expose the screen toggling as a protobuf command that you could send to the device so that you could even trigger it potentially from the app at some point. Particularly for the boards that don't even have the option of adding a button, like the new compact core boards. I can't remember the number. Rack kills me with their
19003.
Then but yeah, that's something that I've thought a lot about recently, just because it's like there's no possibilities for actually screen toggling on that without the auto toggle.
Yeah, there's definitely some room for a hardware control plugin with just a variable message, maybe an enum for the operational button that's being pressed. You can just send across dead simple.
It's a good idea. Control it on an enum, and that way we could kind of have a whole collection of them.
You could have it work like a lot of test and measurement instruments that have like a web UI or something like that, or a remote control screen. They basically just have a button number, and you can just send a message with that number, and it's like you're pressing a physical button on the device itself.
And we sort of have, I might have to refactor some of the stuff like the shutdown and the reboot, because I did add the NRF shutdown functionality via protobuf, but I think that's kind of a standalone thing. So if we want to like actually make a full collection of device commands, it would be really neat to kind of categorize it. I think there already sort of is, but it's called like admin message or something. I can't remember the exact hierarchy in the protobufs, but
yeah, that doesn't really touch hardware.
Kind of segregate it a little bit and have more of a purpose-built
Yeah, from
kind
a
of.
security perspective, you probably don't want to be able to remote administer hardware presses, so that's probably not a
Right.
feature people want anyway.
Yeah. Well, counterpoint to that one, we do have a ham mode where someone can self-certify that they are licensed. Part of the requirement of a remotely operated node is that you can remotely shut it down if there's a problem.
So maybe
So,
we keep shut down and restart as
yeah.
admin messages then instead of. I was just trying to think of reorganizing that code, but yeah, it might make sense to keep those if we're actually. And I haven't actually tested them as remote messages
Mhm.
like over the mesh. I've only done it over the Python CLI through USB.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a soft shutdown could be a separate concept to remote or like administering a reset button press.
Sorry, I've been drinking too much coffee. I'll be right back.
Because if such an API were to implement like an enum to a button or a hypothetical button,
Mhm.
if we were to stick strictly to that anyway, a soft shutdown wouldn't necessarily fit in that anyway, and that would allow us to remote administer yet still keep this new API.
I think the other thing that kind of that I've thought a lot about with in terms of usability of the device screen itself is, and I think I've talked about this in Discord, but I really like to at some point, and this might require an enum itself, like look at customizing which frames are selected when it renders. There are some cases where some users might not care about seeing like the nodes on the carousel and having those kind of supersede the
Yeah, when I
text.
boot up like 15 nodes and you have to scroll through 15 to get the IP address if you don't have one connected to serial. Yeah, I like that. Like have like each function that can appear on the screen as an entity, and maybe not necessarily like it won't disable the functionality, but like whether it's present on the screen, just have maybe just like a bitwise field like we've got for the positions, the exact same thing again, but for the screen modules.
Yeah, and there's also stuff like the environmental plugin, which is kind of like boss modes and just stays there unless you change it, which is I'm not sure is like I guess in theory that kind of makes sense, but that could be problematic if you want to just have a node
Mhm.
behave like normal, but also report environmental stuff.
Yep. Hey, just a bit of a time check here. Don't want to stop this, but I would suggest if we want to go into what else we can do, we can put it off here at the end. Would that work?
Makes sense
Perfect.
to me.
Awesome. All right. Next tab. Foster, you put this in.
Yeah, so I we have a lot of duplication of documentation right now. There's a lot that initially, like when we were making the push to move stuff over, we just like copied and pasted from all the repos, and stuff got put into multiple places, and that's been brought up a few times. Of it's kind of unclear where we're like where we should be looking. And then it just makes managing the documentation that much harder too, because you have to fix things in multiple places. Um, and so I put this together just as kind of a proposal for how we should like focus on like specific things. Like all hardware information goes in hardware, because right now we have like for the environmental plugin or the new rotary encoder plugin, there's a lot of details about setting that hardware up that's like mixed in with the device configuration of settings. And I think we could abstract that out so that it's all the hardware stuff. Anytime you're attaching hardware to your device, that's all under the hardware tab. And all of this stuff can interlink back and forth, and we can have kind of an overview that says this is what you need to do before you're able to do settings. So this is kind of my proposal. It's sort of a work in progress. But yeah.
No, I'm down for that. That sounds great.
I totally agree with your observation of a lot of duplication, especially on settings.
Yeah, the settings thing, that I will take responsibility for that. I started putting together the settings page back when I was first getting started on stuff, and meant for it to kind of take over and become like the settings page. But then in the software directory, people have been updating all of their information there. The settings page just kind of fell off to the wayside, and so I'm working on some restructuring, getting the settings pages up to date, and then I'll start whittling stuff out of the software pages and kind of having those link to the settings pages, as opposed to right now, like the settings are listed in both places.
You know what might be really useful is once we're done with the restructure, or even just promoting this right here, is to have a documentation of, well, this is the structure of the site. This is what it takes to keep this from getting out of hand. These are the intent of these locations. Box hardware is to be used for X. And then I think from the prior slide, we had 27 contributors to the website. Things are just going where someone thinks they're supposed to go. But if you'd have something that says, this is the intended structure, that'll help this from happening again in the future.
Yeah, along with like a writing or a markdown styling guide, because I know lots of reviews that I've done on stuff, just telling people, oh, add an admonition here, turn this into a code block, blah, blah, blah. Having that in a central place or even co-located, it would save a lot of time in manual review.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think if you scroll down, I'm pretty sure it's there. I have like an about this documentation page that I'm planning on working on. So that's going to talk about making a fork, spinning up like your own like Vercel like versioning, so you can preview stuff. The style guide can fit in there. Just really walking people through, like, if you want to like contribute to the documentation side of it, here's how you do it. Here's where you go. This is style guide. This is all that. I think that will all fit there neatly, and I'm working on that right now. So yeah.
Cool. Anything else? Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Just want to go for it.
Oh no, I just said I agree. With the academy pages, it'll be interesting to see how. Like, I'm excited to see how they look, and I think my only fear with that is like kind of recreating the issue where we have like settings in multiple places and stuff. But I think because we're all aware that that's an issue that we have right now, it won't happen, and we can work together on that. And I'm happy we can storyboard things out how we think it's going to go.
So I think for the Academy section, if we're going into settings, that's already too much detail.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, keep it very, very high level. This is how to open the door.
And some of that probably will evolve when we get into like the GUI flasher, because I think that's going to be like, that's one of the biggest gateway things that like some people just completely are like, oh, what, I don't even know what command line is. So
I've helped dozens of people with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that, like even that's seemingly small barrier is huge to a lot of people. So the Academy pages will probably need to evolve with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
While we're on the website and docs, I just pulled up the Versal usage page. Maybe a much more impressive stat at the start. We've had over 1.1 million HTTP requests and over 40 gigabytes a month transfer traffic.
Oh.
And that well exceeds their free tier. So luckily we got a sponsorship.
Yeah.
While we're on the docs page, showcase I think is another thing that will inform people kind of in an indirect manner, because I know a lot of people have questions about like stuff like solar builds, and obviously there's a lot of options there, and we kind of have to rehash a lot of the same conversations in the Discord and the discourse. So it would be really nice to have specific like use cases really well lined out in that showcase. I think that'll actually work as sort of a help page for that in terms of modeling for the users.
Yeah, I plan on fleshing that out and growing it with the first couple of real world showcases, because I don't really have any sample data to see what people want out of them and whatnot. So I kind of just put in the basics, bill of materials, basic article structure and whatnot for now.
I have one I need to send you, by the way. I've got some pictures and build materials and a little blurb of a little solar build. So
perfect. Just let me know what features you want.
Sure. Garth, you've probably got a pretty good handle on some of that, because I know you have quite a wide array of users kind of around your sphere.
Yeah, I think the solar stuff, getting some information out there, it makes me sad every time somebody builds a solar thing with an ESP32, because you're going to wind up with a stop sign sized solar panel to keep that thing running versus the size of the panel that's needed for a ESP32. So I think that would help a lot. I think the cases that are getting us closer to a sort of radio handset looking thing are pretty key. I know that as the hams have come in, they have sort of wondered what's going on with this odd shaped T-beam radio thing. Like, it's kind of a strange orientation, doesn't fit in your radio holsters and those kind of things. So I think as a like user group, I think, and I imagine a ton of the people here are hams, but I think that group has really digs in, does documentation, contributes code and stuff. So in this time period where we're really trying to kind of flesh out some features and get things set up, it's kind of a good technical user base. So I think I would probably encourage ham related features at some level. I think probably, I don't know what the numbers are just here, but I'd say of the people I'm interacting with, probably 80% are hams at this point. So
Yeah, ham radio crash course definitely drove a lot
Mm-hmm.
of folks our way. It would be interesting to actually put a ham tag on those showcases for if we do end up having someone that actually sets up their node with the ham mode on like 70 centimeter band. That would be, I think that would be huge.
One of the things I've been keeping in the back of my head once 1.3 comes out and we can start focusing on new features, or at least I can, is to document how to attach external powered amplifiers to these devices and have it be dependent on someone self-certifying that they are a licensed operator. And I think that would be attractive to some of, I think, Thropo, you called it the other day, the overclockers. And that'll get a lot of people very interested, at least the hams. Hey, wait a second, I can put a 1.5 kilowatt amplifier on this little thing? Here's a video about it.
Well, and you know, there's some interesting use cases there. We have a where I am, I'm kind of at the base of a mountain that has like a lot of ham radio towers as well as traditional radio towers. And one of them is a club called Karen. It's like Central Arkansas, a response emergency network or something like that. That has sort of like mediates a lot of like weather spotting and stuff like that. It would be really neat to incorporate stuff like that Meshtastic brings, like position tracking over what that node can see. So you could actually have a storm spotter that's got a mobile node, you know, running on top of their car with a little rooftop antenna and actually, you know, pinging back to the tower. That would be awesome.
There's always that moon bounce that was mentioned in Discord quite a while ago. I think we worked out about a kilowatt or so to do that.
Yeah, I've been doing the math on that one. Still trying to find another 20 dB of link budget. That's a tough one. I think the way to do that is to go into the 2.4 gig region and do the EME there, since it's a little bit clearer for that distance. But alas,
Yeah, it'd be interesting playing with some frequency translators. Because I know at work we use it extensively for like the 20 to 40 gigahertz range.
Yeah. Cool. Should we go to the next tab?
I think so. We're like bumping up on our time. I know we'll probably go over, but
all right. So if there's a name here, just can you please talk about what your plans are? Some of these changes will need collaboration with Python, Android, Web, iOS, so on and so forth. So, you know, please bring up those types of questions if they got. I'll start here because I'm on the top of the list. Refactoring radio configuration. So, one of the things I see in the radio config is seem to be quite hard-coded. Radio config has to be rewritten in two different parts of the code. It's kind of tough to create a new region, and the values for the region are quite set. So I'd like to refactor that, really make it just one data structure. Possibly have that data structure be sent back and forth between devices and the phone. That way the phones can actually see what the settings are. And once it's refactored, it can be extended for things like, is a region going to be rate limited by transmission duty cycle? Do we want to start having frequency hopping or channel hopping, and just being able to configure it at that level? Right now, we're not generalized enough to be able to support that. So I think that's going to be one of the first things that I do. I think the implementation from the client side will be fairly simple. It'll just be a change to from an enum to I don't know what just yet, but I think the change there on the clients are going to be easy.
Yeah, the thing that's always been kind of a pain point for me, like tracking down radio stuff, is just the pin mapping with stuff like the T-beam, where you could have the SX1262, or you could have the what is it, like RFM95 or whatever. And it, like, the hand waving that kind of goes on, it's like switching between those two and kind of negotiating which one that the device has on it. It's kind of it's a little bit of a runaround chasing down how the pins get sort of at their end state.
Yeah. Cool. Questions? So the next one I'd like to work on, US region to 50. I actually changed my mind on this. Rather than setting a fixed number of channels, what I'd like to do is to do some math. And if the selected radio configuration uses 500 kilohertz channels, do the math and just figure out how many channels will fit in the band plan. If it uses 125 kilohertz, wide frequency channels, do the math, and then figure out how many channels can actually fit in the selected band. If the selected is 31, well, just being able to scale it that way. One of the issues we have right now is if we have if someone's on short slow or long slow, there's only 13 possible channels, and that will be saturated really, really fast if there are multiple users of Meshtastic in the area. So that'll let us really spread out and have more total network capacity.
That should also allow for region-independent logic.
Yeah. Very good point. And that'll be completely transparent to all the other clients. They just wouldn't have to know about it. Questions?
Yeah, some remarks on that one. We have to be a bit careful with these mathematics because essentially you're calculating the center frequency of the spread. I've done some research a few weeks back on band plans, and in the corner situations, you get situations where you have a frequency that, depending on the spreading factor, overlaps in the area you're not allowed. So you have to kind of implement this with boundary boxes.
Very, very good point. I will prototype it in Excel first or Google Sheets, just so it can be more visual before actually implementing the algorithm. But very good call.
I could do some real world testing with that as well.
Right on.
Good idea.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing about that is something that I can't remember who brought it up in the discourse about the issue with the radios not working particularly well without a TXEO on it was like the 31 kilohertz bandwidth. I can't remember.
Yeah, there was an issue on GitHub about it. It was something 0.5.
Yeah, it's like 31.5 or something. But I almost wonder if we need to like set some sort of like warning text when you're on that particular channel setting. Like, hey, FYI, this might be problematic for your hardware, depending on which radio module your device has.
That's actually kind of part of my plan for the radio configuration, is to really criticize all the predefined spreading factors, bandwidths, and one of the things I noticed in there is on our spreading factor configurations. So multiple settings have the same spreading factor, and LoRa allows more use of the available bandwidth if you don't overlap those spreading factors. So I'm going to have a complete review of all of that, and try to maintain the same link budget with what we have now, but avoid some of the troublesome ones. 500 megahertz is troublesome. The 1262 just doesn't like that at all. Avoid 31 where possible. I'll do some refactor. I'll share it before finalizing. And one that I'd like to throw in, I started, suggesting the name here would be a dirt slow setting. That one would be literally the slowest and longest range setting possibly that someone could use without having to go and get extra special expensive hardware. It would add additional 6 dB to the link budget for what we have right now. Right, that's going to be a near 4x increase in range.
That'll take 30 seconds to send a single payload.
It's 4 times
Are you
slower.
going to send emoji to the next country over?
Yeah, it would be interesting to try that one out with the 1 watt modules.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, that's a great. I'm glad that you're kind of auditing all of that stuff, because I don't know how, without talking to Kevin, I don't know how arbitrary those choices were, or if he kind of, put a lot of math into that to try to figure out the optimal channel settings, or if it was just kind of like, these will work.
It looks like they were initially lifted from LoRaWAN, but then diverged at some point. And
that makes a lot of sense.
And one of the things that we can take advantage from is, we're not LoRaWAN.
Yeah, and LoRaWAN, operates with multiple radios in particular, right?
Yeah.
So it's got a completely different set of requirements, and
yeah.
Yeah, on the other hand, if you're not using the LoRaWAN channels and specifications, there's less chance of collisions with LoRaWAN.
That's a very good point.
True.
Cool. Moving on, the next two are simple. Rename EU 865 to 868. Nice and simple one.
That just breaks everything from in terms of the enum, I'm guessing. The big.
At this point, we can't do that now because it would break the enum. But if we're going to be breaking it anyway, let's fix it.
Yeah, I would chuck a note in the docs, because I know a lot of people buying hardware is quite often mislabeled. So if they clearly click on the only one that says EU in the title, they can clearly get a thing. Oh, you bought a device that says this? Don't worry, it's okay.
Exactly.
This just kind of sparked something in my head, though. How are we going to handle the transition for the Python API with the 1.3 stuff? Are we going to have a completely separate release cycle for release for the 1.3 that's kind of
they used to be done in lockstep, because I know Kevin used to man the development for the Python API. I actually added a note under the Dev Day questions tab that kind of addresses this. So maybe pause this point, because I kind of touch on it a little bit later.
Okay.
Yeah, I did remember seeing that there. Next one to be quick. Longfast uses the 31, I think it is
31.
31 or 50, 500, forget what it was. Just, get it out of there. Just, anything potentially troublesome that some chip might have an issue with, get it out. And then my last one is to build in support in the device side for group chats on the primary channel. My idea right now is there would be some device, probably something that has been identified as a router, which would maintain a key value pair of indexes and the actual name for the group chat group. If the router is not available, the group chat is just identified by an ID, a number, and then the router device would periodically send out the name of the chat. If there are multiple routers on the network, they would all maintain the name value pairing, and they would communicate with each other and know which one has been on the network the longest. And the one that's been on the network the longest would be the one that would send out that channel pairing. That way, multiple routers don't send out the same information. But then if that one goes offline, there would be backups. And of course, the intent of the router is it's well placed, well powered. Someone knows what it is, and there's nothing which says it has to be up on a hill or up on a tower. It's just this is the one that's intended to be, authoritative. Questions?
Seems like a pretty solid idea.
Yeah. Going up to Caveman. I don't remember if he's here.
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome.
Yeah, this item using littlefs on the expressive platform is essentially done. There's one thing that is open still. There was a bit of a question when I implemented this, and this is if the actual files on the file system where we store the settings, the proto files, if they are compatible between 1.2 and 1.3. And we need to implement some mechanism to back them up and put them back on the device, or if you have to configure that from scratch anyway, so we can just ditch the old config.
My
I'm
opinion.
in favor of breaking it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
me
just
too.
break it.
Because the whole thing is going to be broken anyway. I mean, we're making potentially like incompatible changes in terms of the proto buffs, like the U865 to 868, for instance. That's
Yeah, I know a
break
couple of
everything.
real nasty ones that are going to change.
Yeah, sure. That will actually make it easier to implement this or take it over. I have put this on some of the devices I have here with the 1.2 firmware, and it's working pretty well, but I'm sure I haven't tested any edge cases. The essential difference between the two file systems is that one knows about directories and the other doesn't. The older one, the SPI FFS doesn't. On the other hand, we're using the littlefs already on the NRF 52 platform, so I don't think there's too many issues hidden that I didn't catch yet.
A question to you, as we plan on upgrading to the ESP32 Arduino version 2, are there any major changes with the littlefs version that's bundled with that, or is it just going to be a just straight?
No, this is essentially the
respect to
same
that.
library. This is essentially the same library, just it got bundled at some point, and the naming scheme changed a little bit. It was mostly on the case. The external library is all uppercase, and the included library is camel case. So this needs to be modified for the new platform, yes, but not in terms of rewriting stuff, but just renaming stuff.
It'll
Perfect.
need to
That's
be
easy.
excluded in the platform IO config, I think, because I had to do something like this for Nimble, because there were Nimble like re-implements a lot of the sort of the Arduino ESP32 Arduino core Bluetooth methods, and so I actually had to explicitly put like minus Arduino or something like that in there in the platform IO to actually explicitly exclude it. So I think we'll probably have to do something similar here for little FS. Would be my guess.
Actually, I haven't run
Yeah.
into stuff like this because in the smaller platform, the 8266 platform, it's already included, and I had to explicitly pull in the new dependency to implement it without the 2.0 expressive toolkit.
Well, as long as we're not rebundling and packaging multiple versions, should be all right.
Yeah, and they might be doing some clever macro guards or something there to actually prevent that from happening.
Yes, but if we decide to upgrade the expressive toolkit and we don't break too many stuff with that move, because I fear we will not be able to do that. This can be a relatively easy check that the right little FS library from the toolkit is used and not bundled twice.
If we bring on other architectures to start using a file system, let's say the Nordic semiconductor chips, maybe someone wants to attach a SD card, or maybe someday we support the ST micro chips. There's been a lot of requests for that. And some of the stuff that they're coming out with is actually really, really fascinating. Would little FS support other architectures?
I'm not sure little FS would support it, but in our code it's abstracted to a file system abstraction layer anyway. So the only thing that is a bit picky about this is actually introduced quite recently, the tar-gz library for the download and decompressing the web interface. This needs a bit of macro magic to tell it what file system is actually used to unpack stuff into, and I had to reintroduce the 2 or 3 macros for the Arduino version to just make that work. But I think from what I've seen from implementing this, this is the only place where there's actual decisions made on the type of file system we are using, and pretty much everything else is hidden behind the abstraction we're using already. So I think it would not be too problematic to implement stuff like SD cards or other file system implementations, as long as they use the same semantics regarding folders and files and locations. For instance, we are dropping one restraint with the move to little FS, and that is the maximum size of a file name of 32 characters. That's not in the new code anymore.
That's wonderful.
That was a nightmare for us, wasn't it? I would like to support the little WizBlock flash modules. I know there's a couple of various sizes and speeds and whatnot that would be pretty easy drop-ins for the WizBlock platform.
Even these problematic TLoRa V2 1.6 have a little micro SD slot that I've never experimented with.
You know, that could be something we could try out as an MVP, is to get that SD card working. I actually have one here on my bench. And for the MVP, we can put the range test CSV onto that SD card. Right. Let's just see if it works. Let's see what happens.
I've got a really interesting use case for this. I was having a look at the Mapbox API, and there's a fair bit of work going on with tile servers and whatnot in the map chat. And I know the iOS app at the moment supporting uploading tile sets, and so does the Mapbox API. So that includes obviously the Android, which you're using, I think, still, and me with the web app. If we have a large SD card or whatnot, we can upload offline maps and have the web client and Android clients observe those maps.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Because in theory, the Bluetooth bandwidth should support that level of transfer, I would assume. Or
or even I'm not sure how it would go with supporting X file systems on like whatever file system on the SD card, but I know the Mapbox API supports just like vector tileset, like just single file vector tilesets of like 20 gig a piece up to. So you can just put the SD card in your computer, put your just like a Garmin or something, chuck your map or vector tileset on and put it back in the radio, and it works. Well, if we get it to that point.
Yeah. I think the one of the problems that could arise here is the embedded web server of the ESP chip. From what I've found out in the past, it doesn't like sending big files very much. So
Yeah,
I
that's why
think
we'd have to stream it.
that could be a bit of a problem. But maybe this will be easier or better working if you switch that to WebSockets.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Streaming like the vector data over WebSockets should remove most of the overhead, if not all of it, minus the initial connection.
Yeah. I have another project I've been contributing to over the last year, where there's actual audio streaming from an ESP chip from data that is received over LoRa as well. And the only solution there was implementing that as WebSockets.
Pretty amazing what you can do with them.
Yeah. So I've looked into WebSockets, and it would actually be fairly simple to support. The only gotcha is our API into the two phone from device or whatever those endpoints are. They only support one connection. And so, right now we don't really support multiple connections at once, and that's kind of a nice self-limiting feature on accident, because we can't really open up multiple connections to those endpoints. So, if we do end up supporting WebSockets, some sort of connection manager will need to be put in place to make sure that those endpoints are only ever used by one client or one requester at a time. And this is back to the issue where we can't have the serial endpoint and the web endpoint and the Bluetooth endpoint operating at the same time. It's one at a time.
I'm quite happy because I think at the moment I'm really one of the only clients consuming those web endpoints. I'm quite happy to drop those in favor of WebSockets because at the moment I think it is only my JavaScript library that's accessing those. But correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you're correct.
We can just wipe one item out because I know that snake case versus camel case is an opinionated thing that Protobufs loves camel case and Python obviously loves snake case. And so the choice was made to leave. So Protobufs turned snake case into camel case. And so the choice was made that those working with Python expect and want snake case, and those working with Protobufs probably expect there to be camel case. So nothing was changed. We didn't merge into one because both of the places where we have different choices made are pretty opinionated. The Protobufs demand camel case and Python likes snake case. So
Did not know that. So you're suggesting crossing this off? All right.
Who dropped in the create system for changing GPIO mappings at runtime?
that was me. That one in particular, and this is more of a personal thing. I mean, there are use cases, I suppose, for other folks, but when I was working with my own sort of variant on the 1 watt Meshtastic DIY stuff, I thought, gee, this would be really nice if we could change these at runtime instead of creating variant specific stuff. And I think some work has been done to make that a little bit easier and less hard coded. By Caveman 99 here. I saw some stuff recently committed about
Yeah, I pull a bit
that.
of simplification.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is really necessary. I even thought about putting them in the proto buffs themselves, but I think that might be overkill. And
I
might
think
create
Kevin
some.
had a similar idea with the 1.2 release back in the day, wanting to have that's when we merged the all the regions into one build. I think he wanted like a single or just a handful of builds, but I think he dropped it in favor of just getting 1.2 out the door.
It'd be really nice to get rid of the 3 extra firmwares we have that are just the battery pin or whatever, right? Like the Heltec V2 and 2.1 are 1 GPIO pin. And then the T-LoRa 1 and 1.3 are pretty similar, I believe. So
Yes.
we could get rid of a couple of extra firmware that I think just confuses people.
Yeah, and
it's pretty intimidating getting a zip of like 20 bins.
And I guess the issue there is like, do we augment our flashing process with setting those items in a proto buff or whatever mechanism? Because at some point you still have to like make the you don't want to have like a user flash a device and out of the box the battery pin doesn't work because they haven't set something that they don't know about. So I don't know. It's not an easy.
Is there any like vendor like product ID differences or anything that we can differentiate between the software between those devices, or are we kind of user decision limited?
Well, that's the thing is like the hardware vendor that gets defined in the proto buffs is actually informed by the individual build environments that Platform IO sets up, because it does defines on those.
I was just wondering if, because I know you can query the actual chip itself when you flash it. I was just wondering if because you can flash it with a custom vendor ID and a product ID. I was just wondering if vendors were setting those as per individual revisions.
They're just slapping an ESP chip and shipping it. They're not doing anything.
Yeah, it's
But
easier
that's-
for some stuff like the T-beams. Obviously, like you can tell immediately if you have AXP 192 on there because it's on the I2C bus. But some of this stuff is not. It's like they're passive components essentially that are linked to GPIO pin, like the battery pin. So
maybe
one's
where
tricky.
we move towards a unified flasher, so obviously much headway is being made with the GUI flasher. Maybe just have a questionnaire type flasher, sort of like how the Raspberry Pi flash is doing it nowadays. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's a pretty good tool.
That's actually, that's actually one of our kind of models for trying to emulate features because that one Etcher, all these kind of flashing utilities, very simple, easy to use, kind of guided processes.
Setups or something?
But I think we almost like defer this one in favor of trying to figure out, like you said, like maybe make that a part of the flashing process instead of intrinsic to the.
Not as clean, but probably an easier solution.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. What do you have next on the list? Packet level compression. Co-crew, are you on here?
No, they don't appear to be.
What region is he in? He messaged me asking me to donate a T-Echo for that. So I'm waiting from him.
I have original prototype T Echo with all of the JTAG pins broken out. Is actually the kit that Kevin gave me, and I'd be happy to mail it to him.
I can probably talk about this a little bit. I remember the GitHub issue. I think the whole idea was having a device-based. It wasn't just the message; it was like the entire packet. And he showed some proofs of dropping like a good, 20-30% off the transmitted size in bytes. There was relatively simple, not a lot of overhead on the device itself, and I don't know if anyone else sort of remembers the issue. It seemed to be pretty promising.
Yeah, I remember the same stats, and I think right now in the header there's a bool somewhere that says, is this encrypted or is this not encrypted? And there could be another header that says, hey, is this compressed or not? And that's really the only real change that's needed. And if it is compressed, we're just compressing the encrypted header, right? So then the data path would be first uncompress it, and then first de-encrypt it, and then uncompress it. So on the protocol layer, it's just adding one more Boolean, but then it would give us a 20-30% reduction in transmission cost.
Yeah, you're not losing anything with that bool.
Yeah, I mean it's free, and if if we enable compression by default, right, we don't even have to transmit that bool with the protobufs, so there's no cost at all.
I know it was seriously dropping the overhead for longer messages, so it allows for a lot more conversational use of Meshtastic if that's the case.
Yeah.
I guess the only concern is like, is there a big performance hit with compression on some of the weaker in terms of processing power boards like the NRF? I wouldn't imagine enough.
I didn't think it was too bad
because they're so like small the payloads themselves that I wouldn't think it would really make.
I had a small look at the suggested library, and this is not the classic compression library like we knew from gzip and zip and stuff. This is a dictionary-based approach, because with very short messages like we have, the compression header or the compression algorithm may actually increase the payload size if you use classic compression. And the library that was suggested looked really lightweight on the processor, so I don't think we put any strain on the chip here.
Have we got a link to that issue? I can't see it. Or was it a PR?
It was a conversation.
I'm in favor of just compressing all the payloads in at that point. It's like, why would you not want to?
It works better with plain text when I read it correctly. So chains of numbers are not very good for this compression algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we don't compress position plugin messages, but we do compress text message payloads.
Yeah.
I think this is a case where we evaluate the result concept. I mean, we can easily just create some bits, feed it into the compressor, see what the result is.
Right.
Yeah, I know with a lot of the protobuf clients, we can just generate messages at will. We could generate, say, some 500,000 messages and chuck it through and just look at the statistics.
Sample it.
And if it ends up being that we're only compressing the text from the text message plugin, well, that's probably 95% of the use.
Yeah.
I think there was a bit of benefit from compressing some of the larger, like deeper nested messages as well. So maybe we'll see.
Yeah. And then I really, really appreciate him stepping up for line 18 here.
That's a big one. It's going to take a lot of work, I feel like.
How did I know there was an updated bootloader that people were starting to flash. How did that sort of eventuate?
I don't know that anybody knows how to do that. I think there's a couple of devices that people received with an updated bootloader. I have not seen evidence that anyone has put that bootloader on a device that they already have.
Yeah, I think
I
I only know of one person.
So I was the one who made that new bootloader, again, just by merging changes. So I've been following it really close, and you're right. No one has actually put it in. The instructions on how to use it, though, it is documented on site. And I looked through it. It looks fairly simple. Gone through it myself. So the how to use it is there.
Maybe we could onboard the first sort of few users that start doing it and then sort of make it a little more pertinent when they visit the hardware page. Just sort of like with the rack devices, you need to update to the, I don't know, March 2021 or whatever the newer bootloader is. Iron out a couple of the kinks and sort of force people to do it even.
Yeah.
Well, were you able to do it without like the use of a J-Link or?
You don't need a J-Link according to their website. There's like some button sequence, or it goes puts it into DFU mode.
Put in
and
the
then
Konami code and
up, down, left, right, A, B. Yeah. All right.
Select start.
Select start. Good memory. All right. Two more with names. Sasha.
Yes, this is a one that's going to be beneficial from the app perspective. Because currently, obviously, we're trying to limit the protobuf sent over the air, obviously, minimize airtime. But what's actually sent to and from the device that never gets transmitted, we're not really limited, or we're nowhere near the headroom of that. And I know, at least developing the web UI, having to go and find out what the defaults are, what they mean, is kind of a pain in the ass. And I know I've bugged a whole lot of you about that time and time again. But if we can remove a lot of the like specific enums or options for defaults and just pre-fill that data that gets sent to the client, clients don't actually have to know or understand those defaults. It should just make app simplification a lot better, because I know the hardest thing I've got at the moment is, say, when a user gets the preferences, it should populate a form, but not with the default value. It should interpret the default value as whatever's documented. And then to be able to change that, I need to change it back to the default value where I'm writing too much. It's kind of just a bit of a pain in the ass at the moment.
And this kind of coincides with the default of 0 being a problem, I'm guessing. Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah, I think some red guy ran into that recently with the environmental measurement plugin sensor types, and it was like DHD sensors were set as 0, which
The GPIO didn't have a default too, because 0 wasn't sent. So
I think if we can sort of move towards being explicit by default on all locally sent messages, so to the phone, whatnot.
So is there a protobuf library configuration to turn that on? Since we don't manipulate it at all.
I don't think so. So I think basically, instead of not sending the bytes, just do send the bytes, because there's a bit of logic being done on the device itself to so I think of it from this perspective, maybe like on initialization of the protobuf database, when you flash the device, instead of populating it with zeros and then interpreting those zeros in firmware, populate it with the correct values and then just interpret them as what they are. If anything, it should actually make, minus the initialization process, it should make the logic a little simpler.
I'm looking through the Nano PB docs right now.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see if we could actually leverage the Nano PB stuff to actually generate the classes with those defaults correctly.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with that client.
So how about this? Sasha, you put your name on here. If you can find documentation on how to enable, then I will take that on.
Deal. Hopefully there is such a thing.
Yeah. And the next one. Deprecate 1.1.x.
Yeah, I think there was a bit more attention than there needed to be paid towards backwards compatibility with the 1.1 to 1.2x. I think because there's a number of drastic changes I think we want to make to the proto buffs, I'd say there's I think I made sort of like a fork just to sort of draft what's going to get removed quite a while ago, but there's actually quite a bit of thinning we can do to the proto buffs themselves, and quite a few edge cases that are currently addressed for migration and backwards compatibility in the firmware that we can just get rid of.
Do we want to take this opportunity to version the proto buff somehow?
I played with that idea. It's a
Too much?
bit hard right now just because not all of the clients are in lockstep with it. I think being in lockstep with the firmware, because the only thing that's really dependent in terms of functionality on the proto buffs is the firmware. So I mean, you could keep the firmware in lockstep with the device, and then your apps in lockstep with the firmware, versus having to have your apps in lockstep with both. If you kind of get what I'm coming at. Like, I played with the idea, but it just seems like extra maintenance for not a lot of benefit. But I mean, if someone else has got their 2 cents or other ways of doing it.
No, that makes sense. And obviously we couldn't like completely just, you know, you would almost have to peg it to the MITRE version and not you couldn't be like, well, these are only 1.2.52 compatible.
If we got, obviously, if we ramped up the development a fair bit more and got a whole, bunch more contributors and whatnot, and we could switch to Semver or something like that, it might be a little bit easier. But I also see that creating a lot of needless minor revisions where nothing really changes in the proto buffs, just to
Right.
support lockstep and Semver. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I think the last two firmware releases are essentially breaking for a lot of people because they added so much functionality. I mean, just getting rid of the T-beam sleeping on the both apps. You can't use a ESP32 device effectively on the iPhone app when the sleep takes place. So I think the last two, I'm seeing people upgrade really fast because there's so many new features and stuff. So I think without even entirely intending to do it, 5.2 is kind of a breaking release because everything before behaves differently, and we solved enough problems in the last 2 or 3 that people are upgrading much faster to these two than the other ones. So I agree. I think a lot of the old backwards compatibility and stuff is kind of gone, and that we've solved some bugs and stuff that make the experience a lot better and I don't think we get much from being backwards compatible with versions with bugs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of insight now that we've got some more mature clients and apps, that it just a whole nother perspective that we didn't have before. And I think that's a lot of the reason we're restructuring a lot of things. I know the proto buffs made perfect sense from a programming and developer perspective, but creating UIs and apps, it was just horrible. And then, so we're trying to find that middle ground right now. And I think that's sort of one of the big things we're starting to see with what we're proposing for 1.3.
You mentioned you've got a list. If you have that, I will tag team with you on that one as well, and remove some of
I'll
the
dig it up.
ability stuff.
Yeah, there's a ton of cruft in the device code base in particular that I'd love to get rid of. The proto buffs is great, but if we could kind of like trace that end to end,
Yeah.
and make sure that we've completely gotten rid of it in all of the facets.
Yeah, maybe for each of the changes or like sets of changes, we could create an issue and tag each of the primary
Yes.
library repos, and then we can just, have checkbox that each author checks when they've removed or added that from their client.
One of the things that I want to focus on, it's not so much a feature of 1.3, but while we're kind of breaking everything, is I want to break more of the code base of kind of the monolithic structures that exist right now. Like main.cpp is it's like I don't know what 1,200 lines, or it's massive.
And a lot of that's for handling a button.
Yeah, there's like button thread is in there. There's several threads that are just kind of declared in line that just need to be broken out. And some of that might need to be refactored, honestly, into plugin architecture.
Yeah, I know there's a number of things that should be. I think there's plugins encroach a little bit too much on a lot of the other systems at the moment. It'd be nice to be able to have the APIs available for plugins to be completely self-contained. Maybe even flags for building or including specific plugins. I know size is our biggest issue right now, I'd say.
And even within the plugins I'm working on right now, because I've been in that environmental measurement plugin quite a bit. There's so much sensor specific code that is in that thing. It's just kind of like a big case statement of like, what sensor do you have? Oh, I can get those readings. I want to break those out into kind of subfolders with their own headers and
I'm definitely changing the protobuf message names for that environmental plugin. It like if you look at the table on the docs, the name is the largest column.
Yeah. It almost I think we drop environment because there's a lot of like other peripheral devices, and I mean you could make the argument that they're sort of environment. It's like, oh yeah, we're measuring the current of the environment, but
yeah, I'd just say
really
analog sensor or even sensor.
Yeah, just measurement plugin, sensor plug, whatever, because there's a lot of stuff that we could take point in time measurements of current voltage in addition to temperature and humidity and all that.
What do you think of telemetry plugin?
Telemetry plugin might be interesting because we could, especially on the higher speed settings, we could be sending out pretty frequent messages, and that kind of lends itself to telemetry use cases.
Would you have a telemetry plugin run over its own channel, or how would you see that? Because I know most of the devices that I've worked with that have telemetry pretty much always have a separate RF link for telemetry only.
I think the environmental plugin right now does work on its separate port.
Yes.
And so we could just reuse that the way it is. So just rename environmental measurement plugin to telemetry plugin. And then that'll give it more generalization. We can just measure whatever we want.
I gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, I think most of the external apps have to use their own port. Like I think ATAC has one, right?
Yeah.
I haven't really messed with that much. I've just kind of seen it in the periphery.
It's more to stop apps and things interpreting your arbitrary messages as one of their own. It's more of a safeguard. You can technically send anything over anything.
Cool. Should we go over the uncommitted ones?
Yep.
Create system for changing. Okay, we already did that one.
We did that.
Is there someone who'll take this?
Yeah,
I think we decided on the flasher.
Yeah, I think we want to say kind of like deferred / me, because I don't think we want to do it as it exists with that current kind of
There you go.
Works.
So still a good idea, but not a dependency to exit the breaking build.
Yeah, I think a lot of that will exist outside of the device. So
line 15, separate user from node.
I think that was a comment I made on GitHub. I think at the moment, at least from the app perspective, whenever we receive a position, we need to check whether there's a user attached to that and then update it and whatnot. But as it's only being sent to the device, it can kind of probably be sent out as its own message, or just be decoupled in general from a node info. I don't know how you want to structure that, but
Yeah, I put it in the spreadsheet And my thought was, for messaging purposes, especially now that you can do a DM, a user may have multiple devices. And so I don't want to lose the message history, but I periodically want to delete nodes because node data goes badly. So for me, at least on the iOS app, having a set of users that we could pull in and then a mapping between the user and their current device is what I was thinking here.
Like if a user could have so I think at the moment we've got sort of like, there's a bit of different terminology in the protobufs, whether we call it a number, a num, or ID or whatever, but basically sort of have that attached to each packet that identifies a user, or just like a single entity, if you will. Because I know at the moment within the web app, basically whenever a protobuf comes in, I just restructure it to what's consumable within the app, because the current way isn't really structured well enough to support messaging and groups and stuff like that.
Volunteer?
I'm happy to draft the protobufs, but someone else will have to implement the device side stuff.
So let's get the protobuf drafted, and then we'll have it reviewed, and then revisit the proposal.
Sounds good.
Okay. Move battery level out of position.
That kind of goes hand in hand with the last one. I think there's just a few too many fields that aren't necessarily position related. Whether or not there's enough functionality that can be moved into its own message, or we might be able to tack that on elsewhere, maybe even just like the node info. I know that it's
node info is, I think, where that needs to land.
Yeah, because the other thing too,
and all kinds of other things on that.
The battery level should be predictable if you can take a couple of readings. So I don't think we need to get multiple updates per percentage, if you will, or 1%. Because if it's solar, we can predict based on the solar day, and if it's linear, then we only need a couple of points over the lifespan of the battery.
Yeah, and having to allow position data that is 0, 0 is problematic to manage in the apps, right? So like the T Echo, which periodically sends out crap position data, we could just ignore a lot of it if we didn't have to also check the battery thing. So if the battery came in with the node info, we wouldn't have to, it would clean up the position data for the maps, which are kind of a mess with having to support. So basically in the iOS app, I either store an array of all the position updates or your last battery update, which is kind of a silly set of logic to maintain. And then as people change like fixed position and stuff in their settings, then it creates all these weird edge cases where suddenly you are expecting an empty position packet, or you get one you weren't expecting, or the Python API is still showing lat long, but the coordinates aren't coming into the position array. So it just creates a bunch of weird edge cases, I think.
So I updated this. Move battery level out of position and into.
I think that's the best spot for now.
Volunteers?
I think I could probably take that one on.
That was Ben?
Yes.
You got it. All right, good checklist. Anything else before we go into the last tab?
I don't necessarily think ones that need discussion, but we are obviously still tracking the milestone on GitHub with the 1.3 release. I think that covers a couple other important but not necessarily difficult changes, like renaming my node info, and also adding, there's one or two methods that sort of are omitted at the moment.
Sure. So
It
how
would
about
seem that a lot of the 1.3 breaking changes involve sort of restructuring and renaming the protobufs themselves. So I almost wonder like if we need to have like some sort of field day with with like taking a chainsaw to the protobufs project before we start
Yeah,
anything significant
I'm in
on the
favor of having like a branch of the protobufs repo where you just wreak havoc, and even if we don't agree on that, just sort of paint this ideal picture of what we want to work with, and then sort
Absolutely.
of draft out issues from there.
Draft a constitution of new protobufs.
love it?
No, most of
Yeah, other than
the
that, I think we can
dev
move
day
on.
questions, those were more kind of framed for Kevin, I'm guessing.
There were framed for Kevin, and I got an email from him here saying that he missed the invite. So I texted him saying that it's still going on. But I think a lot of this we can just converse ourselves, and if we can come up with our own answer, all the better.
That's right. He can review this and have a look at these later if he's got anything to add. And
Yeah,
chances
yeah.
are we'll meet up
If
more
he wants
frequently
to,
anyway.
if he wants to write up some stuff kind of around some of these that are, if we can distill a list of things that are specific to him,
Mhm.
that would be fine.
Sure. Oh, thumbs up going into the dev day questions. Yes. Okay. The first one here. I see the use of the broadcast address being sent to max int, so FFFF and with, but we use that in a lot of places. Zeros are free over the network. A lot of Fs are not. Right? So why send 4 bytes when we can send 0 bytes?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. It shouldn't be a hard thing to change. Just basically invert the logic, check if it is there versus isn't there.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So I'll investigate this a little bit more. If it seems like it makes sense, I'll make the flip. But that means everyone's going to make the flip as well.
Right.
Yeah, that's as easy as just a string for me.
And this one here, I mean, there is actually a definition of broadcast address. All I got to do is just change that to 0. But there's going to be other checks to make sure it doesn't break anything. All right, next one. Red.
I don't think he's here right now.
Did he? No, I do not see him.
Nah.
He's using that a ton for testing, and I think it's not used anywhere else really. So he was just trying to figure out what the origin was of it. I think because it helps him isolate. It's probably exists for the same reason he's using it, which is to test.
Maybe rename it to --debug, like a dedicated debug flag. Because I know once or twice, I think Kevin asked me to run it to debug something. Because no proto isn't very intuitive.
Okay. Next one here is about having hardware share. So I do have the prototype T Echo that I'd be happy to put in the box and send it to someone. I have I don't know what model hardware this is. I think it's a T-Beam something or other with the SD card. I'd be happy to send that around. So I do have some hardware that I could donate to our community.
Yeah, I've got a whole heap of WizBlock devices and basically a dozen or so T-beams that if anyone's in Australia or close enough by can have/borrow, whatnot if they're going to contribute.
So maybe we come up with a lending library.
Yeah, maybe even almost have like a read only to everyone, basically on Discord, almost like a Craigslist. Like, this is the hardware available. This is the region. Contact this person, and I don't know. Maybe have at least a little bit of a track record type thing. Vet some people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're not sending out hundreds of dollars worth of hardware to randoms, but yeah, almost like a Craigslist sort of thing. Maybe listings that people have got and whatnot.
Yeah, I would almost limit this to the dev lounge, to be honest,
Yeah,
because
another
it's like
another
you don't
channel
want
that
to.
have the same permission.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of random stuff too. JM, do you have any rack devices at the moment? Because I know there's outstanding.
I now have one. Thank you, Garth.
All right.
Yes.
That's great.
It's in a box. But I now have one. It's
Awesome.
beautiful.
Yeah, I've sent a fair amount of hardware around in the US in the last couple of months. So
Yeah, I've got
Yeah,
a few.
I found once people have sort of made a few contributions and sort of made their self known, even sort of put their name on something, they tend to kind of stick by it. So I don't think you have really many issues as long as they've shown some interest in the project and actually done something with it. Because the telltale
Right.
sign of someone being there for nefarious purposes is not actually ever doing any work.
So I'm trying to reformat the screen. Any volunteers to figure out how to do
Yeah, I can do that if you want.
the voice was?
Me, sorry, Sasha.
I can help with logistics in the US since obviously shipping is going to be. He can work on the web parts, right? But if the actual facilitating and the shipping from Australia is probably hard with a lot of people in the US.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Do it on Discord and have maybe like a pre-formatted messages or like a bot or something that sort of like has a few criteria, like specifies the region, specifies whether it's receiver or sender paid shipping, where they're located, like just a bit of info like that, so people can sort of browse the listings and see if it works for them.
This may need to be not just limited to devices, but also sensors, because a lot
Yeah,
of work has been done lately on the environmental measurement. So
yeah.
those
I've got
there's a
like a
lot
good
of
collection
sensors
of one of
deployed.
each.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a massive bin in my of just sensor. And I'd be happy to send this around. So that's a good call out about sensors as well. I've got AC sensors, DC sensors, magnometers. It's just a bin of sensors. So if anyone wants sensors, I'm happy to put it up in the library.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
got a
that's a good
number
idea.
of weather station type stuff. A lot of those Dallas DSB sensors and Bosch BME 280s.
Yeah.
I think my bin of the ones that aren't used in projects are all fakes and don't work.
Yeah, my bin are parts of that I was planning on using, but the project just fell to the side. One of those. All right. Should we go through all the text files and add copyright text? What should the text be? So,
Is this referring to all like source code files on GitHub, or?
yeah.
I'm strongly opposed to this for a couple of reasons. Think about it from this perspective. If someone's going to steal a specific snippet or function that's not going to include the code block anyway, if you're legally including snippets, you have to specify in your licenses. So if you're being legal about it, you're going to cover that. And I think automatic license detection and integration these days through license files, readme.jsons, whatnot, are mature enough that you can't really accidentally not realize what license is being used for the product. I was even looking today, there's a number of license analysis tools for your entire stack that will determine the licensability of your product. So I'm fairly opposed to this, especially maintenance and whatnot, especially a new person that comes along, creates a new file, doesn't do it. Somebody else needs to create an issue or update the file. We need to check for it. How are we going to automate that? Just seems like a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense to me. I've got to drop out, guys. It's
All
been
right.
great. It's been great
Perfect. Thank you.
talking to you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for putting this on. Good to see you guys. See you.
Yeah. So no support from group. So that's
Yeah, we can skip that next one. I think that's a Kevin specific question.
skip BLE and Python on Mac. We'll skip that one. Tunneling.
That's partially working. So I think the thought is that if we could get the BLE working on Python, it'd be easier to do some testing of the Bluetooth functionality. It's sort of partially working. So
Okay. Do we know if anyone's using tunneling?
I heard of one or two people. I don't know if it's a bit, I don't know. I think it was quite a while ago. Um, it's kind of a hard middle ground to sort of tread. Do we, support IP traffic sort of like as a project, or do we kind of deliberately stay away from it? Because the support isn't great, and it's sort of something that I know project goals wise we don't really want to support. So not sure.
Yes,
I think
it's
I'm in
Mark
the
here.
stay away. Oh, go ahead.
So I'd propose that we leave the code in at first, but we feature toggle it off. The big preprocessor if else.
Yeah.
Right? That way it doesn't compile in. It's still there. It is cruft. It is technical debt. And if someone says, hey, I really need this, then it's easy to turn back on.
My thoughts are basically if you need to send arbitrary data over, your chances are you're making your own app. To tunnel all IP traffic over isn't very efficient. So
Mm-hmm. It was fun seeing a 30-second ICMP packet,
oh yeah.
but still, it took 30 seconds for an ICMP packet. So, feature toggle? And I could do this. Thoughts on adding PIO test to device?
Is that referring to CI or what exactly is that? Like I get what the PIO test does, but what does he mean by adding it?
Not sure.
Because I noticed the links to like code coverage reports. I think he's referring to like I helped him get working with the Python CI, basically automatic coverage reporting and tracking. Basically, I think that's just a resounding yes. Like I think we do want that.
I'll agree with yes. Anyone else?
Yeah, I haven't run across any of his testing approaches that I don't want.
Yeah, it's a good thing because you don't have to write tests, but the option's there, and the more we write, the better it is. So that iterative approach is really great for people that don't want to write tests because it doesn't exclude them, me included. I'm terrible for it.
Yeah. That's my kryptonite. Okay. Oh, he asked a lot of good questions. There are assert calls in device. What do we do when we hit this?
I think the device reboots in most cases, what he's finding.
So how about we add, my proposal is let's leave the asserts there for now, but we audit for the asserts and have a debug message right before it hits. Right.
One thing that's kind of loosely coupled to this, but I know is very useful for finding these sort of issues. I don't know if any of you guys have had experience with CodeQL, the GitHub product that they sort of pushed. Basically, code analysis, like querying for code analysis, allows you to find specific parts in your code like this. It's a fairly simple thing to set up. Just basically, it's like a single file in the root that allows your project to be scanned for this sort of stuff, and then you can query specific stuff. So I might just add that to my sort of tracker and whatnot and set that up in all the repos, because a lot of security researchers and whatnot use that to find these specific issues.
That sounds really cool. I'm looking at this right now.
Yeah, it's a bit complicated, but when you get down to actually querying stuff, it makes a lot of sense.
So what is our answer here?
Manual review.
Manual review, add debug messages. Sure.
At least then when people are reporting issues, we'll get the specific debug issue, the debug message that they hit, and we can find out the majority of ones that are being hit, that are hitting users.
Any volunteers for this?
I mean, I can add debug messages, but maybe someone else is better adding the review part.
See, I can do this, but I don't want it to block 1.3.
Maybe add the debug messages for now and just leave them and hit the critical ones with specific issues on GitHub.
Sure. You know, I'll put my name on here for now, and then see what happens. And if it's really as low hanging fruit.
I've got a direct answer for this next one, and I think it's mentioned by a couple of us multiple times on GitHub. We should really stop tracking specific commits for libraries and start tracking versions. I know, have any of you guys seen the newer PIO repository thing? What are they calling it? Sorry, I'm just pulling up the site here. Yeah, the PIO registry, the new thing they've got. It's just at the top of the page in the header. Basically, versioning for PIO modules is getting really good these days, and there's not really any compelling reason to track specific commits and forks. Just stick to a version.
Mm-hmm. So I've looked at this a little bit, and it seems like the reason we're doing is Kevin was finding bugs in the repositories that we were bringing in, and he proposed some of the bugs. He did PRs, but they weren't always accepted. And so we have customizations that aren't in the upstream.
I think, because I know when Kevin was tackling sort of a lot of the groundwork, a lot of the other stuff that we were using was also in its infancy. I think quite a bit of that's fixed by now, and I know you collaborated with the TarGZ lib guy, and that worked out, wonderfully, and we got a new version published. And I think nowadays we've got a fair bit of community behind us and a bit more presence. I think we may be a little more persuasive, and we'll have a little bit less issue with getting things merged, because I know that certainly does have an impact. So I think we can do this in a phased approach. Anything that we can version and don't hit any specific bugs, go ahead otherwise, and we can then focus our efforts on the remaining ones.
And on this one, I would also like to propose that if we're bringing in a library in our platform INI file, put a comment in there of when that was brought in. So just a date stamp. That way we can really, really easily scan and say, oh, this one looks like it's a year old. Because right now it's...
we can use a GitHub get blame for that. Maybe instead of the note being the time, because we can get that from a blame, maybe put the where it's used.
Sure.
Because I know sometimes I look at the library and go, why the hell have we got this? I didn't even realize we were doing this.
Sure. Sasha, sounds like you got this. Did my connection just drop? Hello?
No, you're still good. You're
Oh.
good.
Sasha, you got this one, at least to get it started?
Yeah, I can go around and have a look at them. Add some versions. I can at least do a test compile and add a few PRs for basically the closest release to the current commit we're tracking.
Yep. When you do that, you'll probably run into an issue with the. I've gotten it updated. It works everywhere except native.
Sorry, with the what? Yeah, I literally, the bit that cut out was the library name.
The OLED library. So you will run into problems with that.
That's right. I can release individual PRs and we can just track those as they mature and whatnot.
Cool. All right. 1.3 branching strategy. How are you doing this?
I mean, I'm a horrible person and I always say master.
I agree to that. You are a horrible person. Endlessly after. So I think once we decide to make the cut, let's 1.2 branch, and then master becomes 1.3.
Yeah, dead simple. A lot of people don't know how to do branching properly, so
yeah. And the same thing for all the other apps and projects. Time box. How much time do you want to give ourselves for this? Is this a 1 month project, 2 month, 3 month? Do we make sure we get everything done on the list? How do we say that we are done with our breaking release?
sorry, I'm just thinking here. So basically, this will be to the first alpha release that we make?
Correct.
Or, yeah, okay.
This is the time we say, okay, we are not going to make any more breaking changes. Because if we just keep moving forward, we'll never get out of it.
I'd be in favor of more in the couple of months span because I think there's quite a few things that will require a bit more, like a bit of maturing more than just a change. So I'd say over 2 months. Doesn't necessarily have to be considerably longer.
I was thinking 4.
Yeah, 4 or 5 seems adequate.
Anyone else?
I mean, we can be real brutal and push forwards at the start and just smash stuff apart. And technically, if the proto buffs are structured as they're going to be in the final product, whether the functionality works or not isn't necessarily a breaking change.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like the right time frame.
So we'll put in here maximum 4 months after we make the switch.
Yep, that sounds all right. I think we'll be a lot more productive if we make sure we're on track of basically the visibility of what's being done and what's able to be done. I know people contribute a lot more when they've got a specific task versus a milestone.
Agreed.
All right, I can talk about this a bit. I know this is sort of what I stopped Ben on before because I said I've got this point coming up later on. This is going to be fairly sort of critical in a sort of midterm with apps and whatnot. So as we update and break things in the proto buffs and functionality, add, remove, etc., we sort of need a checklist. And I think we've got a Google Doc spreadsheet at the moment, whether that's the form it takes or whatnot. Basically, is this app compatible with this change or this functionality? Is it supported in this app yet? Because I know I always forget the new functionality that's been added, and then I'll add it like 2 months later because it just fell behind and I haven't heard about it since. That kind of goes hand in hand with as we tag commits now, I'd like to start tagging whether it's a breaking change or not, or don't tag it. Because then automatic release the automatic release comment that gets generated. I think Prisma is the best example I can see. It's breaking changes and then non-breaking changes are listed by commit.
So the question sheet just disappeared. What's going on?
I'm not sure.
See version history.
Yeah, these are versioned at least.
I think we have edits made by Anonymous. I'm not really sure if we can roll them back. We
Working
should
on
be able to.
Working on it. Restore.
Do you want to make this private real quick?
We're almost done. I'll make it private after this.
Okay.
Okay. Time box. 4 months. Being 1.3. So you're
At the moment, leave that as a Google Docs thing, but it may mature into something else.
Yep.
Or I think we should at least pin the link to the spreadsheet because I don't remember where it is.
It's pinned at the top of the 1.3 Discord.
I might post it in the not announcements, one of the other channels that doesn't get any traffic, so people can see it.
Sure. Yeah. Let's put this into announcements. Why not?
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. We'll pretty it up a bit first, but yeah.
Yeah. Status track.
The next one. Yeah, I think. What are you using for your automatic release message generation? Because we'll have to look at how they want tags done, because we should be able to, whatever it is, it should support automatically separating breaking and non-breaking changes.
Let me show you here. GitHub. It's actually really simple. So releases over here. I'm not going to actually push the button. I just click that button. Auto-generate.
Okay. We'll have to do a bit of reading into it, but I'm sure that they allow some sort of tag or generation or proforma, or I don't know, something.
This is not actually working correctly with our system. I've got to do some. It only sort of works in device, and it works perfectly everywhere else. So if you're going to be looking at that, dig into it.
Yeah, we'll send some tickets off. Just let me know what the issues are or whatnot.
Right on.
Maybe add that to the notes of that one. Track issues with current release software. I don't know, whatever it is, GitHub feature.
Track changes with release notes feature. Mark, is Mark here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
Hi, I've been having trouble with my microphone, so I couldn't introduce myself to start with. But I believe some of you have the rack e-paper, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got one with me.
Now, I believe the issue is the library that does the work for the e-paper has only been done for that one screen that's on the T-Echo. Because of the fact that there's two SPI devices on that device. So I tried to make a clone with that other RayTech board, but I can't get my radio and screen working at the same time currently. So that's why I'm asking if anyone else is interested in looking at adding more types of screens. The other Waveshare one is actually a 16-level grayscale OLED screen, the second one that's there, the Waveshare. So that one is also interesting because you can use it either in I2C or SPI mode.
Yeah, we're definitely looking at adding the WizBlock one at the very least, because I know it's a nice form factor and it's obviously supported by the WizBlock platform, so we'll have definitely more people. But we have to have a look at that Waveshare one. How widespread is the distribution? Is it like a fairly niche model, or is it quite a large, well-selling one?
Well, obviously, Waveshare will probably do it for a while. There's some clones of it that only work in either I2C or SPI mode. But I can find some here, but I don't know if you guys can find them there. But it's actually quite a nice screen because of the fact that it's an OLED, and it does 16 levels of shades.
Yeah, I'm just having a look now.
I know the 2.9-inch one that's on the Wiz block seems to be the one that's used in a number of NRF52 devices. So the T Echo seems unique in using that square screen with a NRF52. Seems like most of the rest of the NRF52 dev kits use a 2.9-inch sort of longer screen.
That's what I've seen, yeah.
Yeah, well, I've actually got quite a couple of screens because I've got a bunch of the other LilyGo devices, the e-paper ones.
Yeah,
So you can
maybe
use almost any screen.
maybe extrapolating some of the screen logic to make it a bit more extendable for different models and whatnot. Because at the moment, yeah, it's fairly tightly integrated with specific drivers for specific displays. Definitely, and it's something that we can track.
Okay.
But to answer your question, yes, we do want to add support for, and at the very minimum, that WizBlock e-paper module.
Okay, good.
Should we put a name here?
Who's done most of the screen logic up to this point? I'm not familiar.
I've added 2 screens, but I don't know what's going on above that.
Yeah, maybe don't put a name yet. We'll just put an issue and maybe test the waters and whatnot, see if anyone's specifically interested or has experience.
Okay. All right. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Next one.
I think we kind of touched on that. Maybe that's a duplicate point, but the one after isn't.
Okay. Next one.
Basically, I did some reading. So at the moment, I don't think we're moving towards the multiple radio architecture. Obviously, it's a bit more complicated, but there's a fair few papers and whatnot on. If you look at that IEEE document, it's quite interesting about. I think it's time power multiplexing for LoRa to up the network capacity significantly. It'd be certainly something that we should explore the possibility of.
Mm-hmm. I was actually exploring the use of multiple radios for dynamic frequency switching. That way, there will always be a radio listening for clients and be able to give the client a time signal that the client can then use for a pseudo-random number generator, which would then be used to select the actual frequency that everyone else on the mesh is transmitting on. And so that
I also have a question around maybe having the ability to use for if we have a router or a relay to have 2 radios but different frequency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's been explored in the past. I don't think it's something that would necessarily be particularly hard to do in software. Basically send the same packets straight out to both radios identically. But obviously, I don't think there's a whole lot of hardware that is supported by a platform from like an SoC level.
Usability.
Yeah, basically, yeah. If there was a board that was sort of similar to one of our supported targets that had multiple radios or at least a software tunable radio, then obviously a software tunable radio couldn't do both at once, but something with 2 radios that are software tunable, yeah, quite possibly.
Okay.
But yeah, at least because I don't think it's been brought up specifically, but I think if we can have a look into time power multiplexing, which is something that's been started to be implemented quite extensively on a few of the other larger LoRa projects, it may prove to be a solution to our capacity issue. Because at the moment, it's not very well optimized for high capacity router nodes.
Yep.
So maybe for the comment, just put like a discussion or something, because obviously it's just a starting point.
Say that again. What should we do with this?
Just have it for a discussion point at the moment. Have feedback, because I haven't asked anybody about it. It was just something that I've done a bit of reading about.
Yeah. Very good. Mark, back to you.
Yeah, so I'm also into mesh with OpenWRT, and that's using Batman Advanced, but there isn't a device that offers multiple capabilities. When I talk of multiple capabilities, it's usually just Wi-Fi or wired, but wanting to add a Meshtastic device to an OpenWRT device. So I did explore that, and I used the tunnel facility, but obviously it was only good enough to ping. I couldn't really get a SSH session. You needed to use something like Mosh, which is UDP based. But you are able to install the Python command line tool. So if there was ability to add to the web front end, like a messaging page, you could use the backend and use the ability to send and get node information, etc. But there isn't anyone exploring this. So it is possible, but it needs further exploration.
With that, do you require IP traffic to be sent over there, or can it be proprietary in nature, like for your use case?
Well, I didn't require specifically IP-based traffic, but it was just nice to have it. Because, if you create a Batman mesh, your Wi-Fi would only go that long, but with a LoRa ability, you could extend the range and at least see if your nodes were up. Yeah, so that's what all it's used for.
Yeah, see, I can see something like that taking sort of like one of a few forms, whether it either be only allowing specific custom messages over that interface, which case require a little bit of intermediate software, which wouldn't necessarily be hard. Otherwise, it would strictly take the Python tunnel feature. So, I mean, the tunnel one has a downside of not supporting higher bandwidth clients, obviously limitations in LoRa. But if you were to allow, basically in OpenWRT, have a LoRa interface that only allows specifically structured packets at like quite a low level, layer 1, level 2 type thing, then you could certainly see some real world, usable performance, but obviously not for IP traffic.
Yeah. So I'm also interested in the messaging part, because you can do the Python command line tool can do all the other stuff that you would typically do over the Bluetooth over your phone for messaging. But then that will have to be like an inbox thing. You'll have to send messages to an inbox because the user would not necessarily log on to his web front end.
Yeah, see, I'd see this sort of taking the form of maybe a plugin or an extension for the OpenWRT platform. So I've used it in the past. I'm not that familiar about sort of the development cycle and whatnot that they use, but sort of like how the ATAC plugin works, sort of integrates with one of our APIs and extends its functionality onto the host product.
Yeah, so the only thing that's currently available is, if your device has a Wi-Fi chipset and an SPI radio, like one of the MikroTik devices, then you only have the only thing you have is the Things network. You can only connect to that type of infrastructure. So there's nothing else, and that's not necessarily just done by that one vendor or one product. People are wanting to do that in OpenWRT as well.
Yeah, well,
but I don't see.
maybe proceed with specification. Start fleshing out the sort of idea of what form, what requirements you see it needing, and sort of how we can meet those needs. Because I'd say the idea is a good one. Obviously, the OpenWRT community is quite large, so it's certainly a product that could be supported. But I don't think the idea is mature enough to proceed with a specific plan.
Yeah, you see, similarly, people think that they are going to buy that Pine Radio USB device and be able to use it with Meshtastic. You see, it's the same conversation. You can't currently use Meshtastic on a PC or a Raspberry Pi by just plugging in a USB radio.
yeah, certainly better support. It'd be nice to add for PC-based nodes, if you will.
Yes, I know
We're
there was
certainly
that.
starting to get a couple more LoRa USB modules on the market.
I know there was that PC port thing that was being worked on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just the simulator, right? So that's not really like that's what would be extended for there to be Linux support, but it's not a Linux
Doesn't touch the
driver
hardware.
per se.
You see, I explored the possibility of making it myself, but I could only get an OLED working over the I2C pins of that CH340 chipset, not a SPI device. So they're doing the same with that one. It's a SPI to USB bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we can look at the PineTab implementation. I know one was worked on by Kevin sometime that actually does function with the PineTab USB LoRa. He actually received one of those from the PineTab company, and so the plumbing is there. And what held that back was just the lack of availability of an actual PineTab with the full integration. But he stepped away from that with it. It just hasn't been looked at in probably about 2 years.
Yeah,
So
they're a bit more widely available. They're actually a really good price, only $15 a piece.
yeah, with $15 shipping.
Of
Yeah,
course.
it's really, really compelling. The plumbing is there. It just needs an owner.
Yeah, being able it's very appealing being able to sit there on your PC and not even having to plug a node in, just USB dongle. But I think we kind of need, because this would be platform dependent. Obviously, Linux would be the first host. You kind of need an operating like a platform specific software developer. Like I think most of us are a bit more general, if you will, or obviously like SoC based or like yeah. So I don't think anyone with that specific skill or mindset more is currently sort of any of the sort of primary developers. So I think it needs developer support more than anything.
Yep.
Driver developers are hard, right? And that's kind of what we would need here to do this work is somebody that can do the complications of having, even just with the various types of Linux PCs and the hardware that you can have, the complexity is already so much higher than it would be to connect to a device over serial and then have it interact. So I don't disagree that they are potentially useful, but there is a lot of software to write. And then there is a lot of integration testing to do because there's a lot more options on PCs than there are on phones. So
my take on this one, I just want to summarize is the basic support is there, use case is valid. We'll support the feature if someone wants to do it, but we need someone to take. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, I think that's what I got from it.
All right. So, we can stay on top of this. We can try to find someone. If you know anybody who actually is passionate, I mean, we can help them as much as we can. Moving on. Yes.
Yep.
Lolo Dev. I saw you typing.
Yep, they're here.
LDev, you're on mute.
We increased the font size for the e-paper on the T-Echo, but still, sometimes I'm not the youngest anymore. I'm looking for my magnifying glasses to read the screen font on the e-paper screen. So I think this slide library or page library we're using is not very well tailored for bigger screens.
I'm not that familiar with the ecosystem, but is there any flexible layout graphical libraries out there? Because I know we're spoiled for choice on the web and whatnot with Flexbox, but I'm not that familiar with embedded systems in this respect.
Me neither. The problem is just today I started a port for the M5 stack core device, and this is using an entirely different screen, color TFT screen. And I'm not. I got it kind of working without the screen, but I'm not really sure how to even implement that different screen driver on top of that. I was looking at the e-paper and the existing TFT implementation we have in the code, and this is simply a wrapper or shim for the original OLED library.
Yes,
So I think
that's why
I think for the time being, with the limited set of devices we have right now, this is working quite well. But in the long term, I think we'll have to go for another graphics or UE library.
Yeah, so whether there's something that already exists, we may scaffold some sort of like scalable position type, like modular system for designing the UI. It may lead to a more basic or simpler UI, but instead of having like pre-programmed pixels and things like that, yeah, maybe have like a so you define the logic for the shape that's being on the screen, extending a logical shape. So like say you want a box here, you define that you want a box in your interface, but then the logic that defines that box will determine what display is available and what shape that actually takes.
I think
Right
we should
now, a lot
also
of this.
keep it. Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, right now, a lot of the screen logic actually is offset based, where it's like there is a line drawn with a particular font, and then the pixel size is calculated for that, and then the next line is sort of drawn with that offset in mind, which is nice for OLEDs, but doesn't necessarily work well for negotiating larger screens.
Yeah, I kind of don't see the utility of really big. Like, I think the fact that Gotenna has no screen is probably a thing we should pay attention to. And then, I think because it's only a $6 add-on plus DIY people, it seems like a really appealing thing. But it adds a ton of complexity. They're fragile. They involve soldering. None of them are going to be even remotely as good as the $1,000 phone that you have in your pocket. So I think we should also think about not having screens in a lot of contexts, because I'm not sure they add a ton if the software is all working right? Like the main purpose I use a screen for is to double check that what the app is doing and what the device is saying are like matched up, which is more of a testing thing than the like actual functionality.
Yeah, I kind of
So
agree with you
especially
there.
for messaging devices, the phone is going to be the main thing. I guess I question whether we should be that focused on having screens there anyways.
I think the biggest point for screens is with the canned message plugin.
Yeah, which literally there's one device, right? So, that I think it's an inexpensive option for them to a ton of stuff, because I'm a DIY guy and it seems like a cool feature to add. But I think if we're looking to add a ton of users without a manufacturer making a ton of devices, getting rid of soldering as an option for a lot of people is a huge win. So
Maybe be a lot stricter with what gets what is a candidate for including on the screen, and then you can focus your one or two critical and yet simple layouts for multiple screens. So you can move a lot of the work away from maintaining a layout for multiple layouts to one or two layouts for multiple screens. So the same amount of work, but supporting more devices.
I can see where the feature request comes from. We are having a talk in the communicator channel on Discord, about standalone devices, and that explicitly needs a bigger screen and a form of input device better than a rotary encoder. It really depends on what you want to do with the device. If you have your companion phone that is paired to the device via Bluetooth, you don't need a screen at all. If you have environment nodes that are collecting data and sending it on the grid, you don't have to have a screen at all. But for instance, one of my use cases I want to explore in the spring, and I also want to make a showcase about it, is building these or putting these on the dashboard of cars while they're moving. And the people that will be using them are not really tech savvy. They want the enclosure, they want to stick it somewhere, and they want a tiny they want an arrow that is pointing in the direction where the car in front of them were going, so they don't lose it. That's basically the use case. And then have 3 or 4 buttons. I need to fill my tank. I need to go to the toilet. Something like that, where you up to now have to use the phone for, and that's not very economical while driving.
Well, let me propose something here. I mean, I see value in the use case of a screen of large. But I'm starting to think that the screen really is just another client that connects to the device, just like the iPhone is a client, the web is a client. A very minimum protobuf translator can be sent over a serial interface, which we already have, right? And so if the screen has just even the smallest microcontroller that handles
that's what I was thinking,
related functions, the graphics, we don't have to support that in the device. All we need to support is that existing serial interface or whatever interface to, and then it could be completely agnostic to whatever backend hardware with.
I don't know if any of you guys have seen a lot of the newer 3D printer touchscreens. They have their own firmware that you flash via SD card in the screen itself. You don't even touch the main board on the printer. That seems like a pretty solid idea, because a lot of these people that are mounting these in their car or want the larger screen, which the screen's going to use considerably more power than unless it's a large e-paper, considerably more power than the ESP32 or NR52 or whatever you got. They're going to be powering that thing off a large battery, or like even your car, your Etlighter, your 5-volt. So supporting a separate device, power consumption should be less of a consideration. So I don't see why something like this find a widely produced, supported screen. And I think the market is there because of 3D printers. I know I've got one sitting just over there that could be flashed with whatever UI and interface just over serial. That seems like a good solution to this, and then we can dumb down and simplify the screen support we have in the main firmware.
And then we could also have just a separate, firmware client library that people can bring, where it just doesn't
have a low-level one.
Anything else, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth. It's just give me serial bits, and then here's your data structure of your users, your chat, your send, and then people can just put whatever on. Right. That way, we're not talking about modifying the device for a specific use, which will be n number of uses.
Yeah, that's plausible, of course.
Yeah. So I guess the first step there to support that, and I could commit to it, is extending our serial interface outside of USB and actually to a serial port. That way someone can connect to it.
It's good. Just like one of these 7-inch, dead simple, board on the back, flash that.
Yeah.
So I'll put that on.
Maybe that also. I'm sorry. You go first.
Yeah, I'll put that on my list. I'll expose our protobuf interface to just a bunch of serial, to do an RxTX pin.
Yeah.
Right. And if we can do that, then someone can integrate with it.
Yeah. Another approach would be to use the architecture like we now have for the input plugin with other E2C devices. Because I've just seen a rotary encoder that uses I2C interface, for instance. And there are going to
I've-
be more and more of these that have a limited intelligence, let's call it like that, and can be hooked just to a bus and used like that.
I've actually got a reference for this. If you search Clipper screen, Klipper screen, it's an amazing implementation for 3D printers that's designed to be flashed to devices, and it's written in Python. It's dead simple, well maintained, and it's an excellent reference for exactly this.
Cool.
I just posted a link in the chat.
See it there. All right. We're coming up to 3 hours. Got a couple more questions here. Who want to take the next question?
I think that next one is pretty similar to above, that there's quite a bit of work there to make Linux a client, right?
Yep.
It's the same problem. You're just
Hold on,
putting it
Chris.
all on the Raspberry Pi.
Linux and drivers, same thing. Meshtastic Merch Shop that also sells custom boards. Actually, you say that I
That's
sort
a
of
little bit hard because whoever we partner with for merch isn't going to allow custom items unless it was Etsy, but then that's a lot of work for a person. Because I think we kind of want to stay away from selling our own stuff as an organization. It just complicates things and puts a lot of trust in individuals with finances, and I think as it's set up now, I know quite a few of you, printing, selling cases and whatnot. It fosters that sort of like community spirit drive thing for products, and I think it's a lot easier to maintain that.
Yeah. And here, I think as a open source application, we are welcoming to who wants to sell, merch, who wants to sell hardware. But I don't think the organization we have structured would actually support that as a source.
I think we're better off getting support from vendors to put maybe our logo / endorsement on their product that it supports. So when they're going out and looking, saying, so instead of us going, we officially support this device, buy this, it's the manufacturer going, we support their firmware, buy our device.
Yeah. And, we do get $1 from Lily every fantastic device that they sell. And they offer this for soft RF and just about anybody else they load up their software. So it's not just unique to us. And so, in terms of finances, there is some money there if we need to pay some sort of hosting. Kevin's holding on to it. It just goes into, there's not much there. And that's really the only money we have to.
Yeah, I think at some point we want to look at maybe a bit of like obviously not spending a whole lot, but sprucing up the front page of the website. I think that's one thing that sort of no one really has the skills for doing some of that artistry. And I think that might be, like I think you and I mentioned, just someone on Fiverr that's got the skills.
Yeah.
In terms of like kind of like manufacturers endorsing are being compatible with Meshtastic products, we've made some inroads with Rack Wireless on that front, and I think they might even be including some of that information kind of on their individual product pages, indicating which devices are compatible with Meshtastic. So that'll be, I think, really nice to have kind of a diversity of
yeah. I think as that platform matures, as it certainly has recently, I think that's going to be a massive. Look, obviously, T-Beam's the thing that I think makes up most of the purchasing at the moment, but there's still that sort of not that clear from the user perspective what the manufacturer intends / supports. But I think if we really get that support from Rack, it's going to be a big help.
Yeah, and I think they have a lot more quality control there, so there can be a lot more of a consistent user experience with those products, hopefully, in the long run.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of people doing IoT device deployments, and they use rack equipment for a lot of their custom stuff, and have not had. I probably sold 300 T-beams, and I think probably, I don't know, 15 of them have crapped out, and I have had one rack board that some red guy managed to put into a somewhat brick state. So the hardware is, I think, considerably better for people to be building devices from. The other thing is that you can build a device and it has an FCC stamp. So for the US, at least, the selling of T-beams and T-LoRa boards is like, I think maybe there's an FCC letter attached to the Helltech board that LilyGo is drafting off of a little bit, but it's not entirely clear to me. So, I think really just lining out some stuff, like as far as what the requirements are. There's some complicated stuff as far as selling the devices. So I think it's a problem we have to figure out how. We're obviously not selling enough units that anybody is building injection molded cases and selling a pre-built package, right? So we've got to figure out how to get to that point without those things, which is hard, I think. So should be, I think we need some creative solutions to get there, because it's probably going to have to be distributed, and then we've got stuff in the world too, and different modules for different regions. And so I think we need to be creative to figure out how to get devices out to people.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I think every part that we drop that barrier to entry, the community just grows.
The GUI installer is going to be huge.
I can't wait. No more support tickets.
Or GUI Flasher, or GUI Maker. Whatever the name's going to be. Right. Moving on. High priority missing enclosures variants of existing enclosures. So one area that I see, I don't want to say frequent, but periodic requests on are watertight enclosures. Not waterproof, right? Just watertight or ingress tight. Something where someone can easily put a device in and not have to worry about it being left outside. Mm-hmm. 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 Mhm.
I've got two things for the cases. Certainly, if we could get like a nice high quality case like your others out for when we get this new rack board with the ESP32 core and the LoRa module, I think that's obviously, well, quite possibly going to be a big seller. The other thing is I'd like to increase the visibility for your cases, because obviously the guys that are in on the whole case scene are sort of on top of it. But I know every time I stumble across your work, I think, holy shit, this is great. You know, I didn't even realize they'd progressed this far, but that's just from me having to go and read in the Discord or look at Thingiverse. So I think maybe if we could chuck some bits in the docs or something like that, at least have like a page or something somewhere that says, you know, these are the cases that are most commonly used or, you know, most developed at the moment, at least sort of maybe even under the sort of like community supported pages like we've got for community supported plugins.
So this is actually a good segue. One of the features on the Let's Go Meshtastic is a sourcing site. You know, these are the places to get started, right? Just very simple. Here's what you need. And I think that's something that we should. We'll have a page there that says, well, you can go directly to LilyGo. You know, it's a good known site. We can go to, I know Garth has a store on Etsy where, you know, full kit can be acquired. I could see, hey, if you want a case, go here to, you know, Tropo site. These are known, trusted places where people can source what they need.
Yeah, like a popular in the community type thing.
Yeah. And so, you know, if this is going to be available, let's do it. It helps people out. Yeah. Yeah.
There's certainly a want for them. We've seen that time and time again. So why not tell people where they are?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can spit out some nice renders and sort of maybe have some like version stuff, we could even tack on like at the footer or like a section in each of the hardware pages. Like we could have like cases for this, and then we could have like a Thingiverse link, so it's clear that it's not like a product that we're selling, and then so, you know, your nice renders. So then you just look at the hardware page, you've got the flashing instructions, you've got about the device, and then you've got community stuff like cases and whatnot.
Cool.
We almost might even want to put a repository out there for official sort of Meshtastic endorsed hardware. I know we've talked about that for like PCBs and stuff, but I think casing kind of falls into that as well.
Yeah, you could kind of structure it like I know in TypeScript we've got the definitely typed repo where like everybody contributes to like their project on that repo. So it's like a single source of authoritative information, but it's from the community. So we could definitely do something along those lines if we want a more centralized thing, and then everyone just submits a PR, and then, you know, it's pretty easy to submit it. You just make sure that they're operating within their folder and it's not malicious, and yeah.
Yeah. Only thing I'll ask us to remember is that Academy page has to be simple. Don't overload it. Keep it
Dead
easy.
simple.
These are, you know, my mother, she's retired. If I can give her that page and have her figure it out, that's a success. Right? You know, that's the audience here. They're not technical. Keep it
Yeah,
easy.
we just have a further reading link on each page, so you don't need to click you, but you mustn't be. Yeah, sorry, I'll rephrase that. You mustn't need to click that to be able to get through it.
Yeah. Cool. I think we got two more
I
here.
can talk about this. Yeah, so we actually discussed this quite a while ago. I kind of had a hybrid approach with this. That I originally had this exact same suggestion: support protocol URLs that are non-HTTP, because obviously some systems have issues resolving custom protocols, and then other systems have issues supporting HTTP protocol redirects. So like opening the app versus your browser. I think the best way is to primarily set the protocol as HTTP. So what we're currently doing, but I add maybe on the page that we currently have on our docs that you added just the other day that shows the user you arrived here because the app's not working properly, blah blah blah. Maybe support a alternate link and have apps register also that Meshtastic protocol link. So the apps support both, but we primarily distribute the HTTP version because of better platform support.
Yeah, I think the custom ones are depreciated on iOS at this
that's
point.
why I thought optionally catch it as a backup, but yeah, they're certainly going away. I think the most prevalent one still is magnet links, but everything else is pretty much moving to standardized HTTP.
This might be one of these use cases that are going to be slowly working themselves out as an issue, because the Android app now supports reading QR codes native, right? And
that was a big one.
At some point, you're being able to import these codes, these channel configuration will be more native to the client, and this problem just goes away. Right? It could be that the page on meshtastic.org/g says, please be sure to use the QR reader in your client.
Yes, except for if somebody
stops.
doesn't have it, they can always scan it, right? So I think having a URL one out in COVID is because even if you don't have the app, right, it still opens the menu.
Exactly.
And so that's pretty much why the custom URLs have died, is because the actual use case has been restaurants and people don't have the apps installed. So the security concern is if somebody is trying to be really secure, having it go to the internet is potentially a risk there. So I could see that, but it does seem like it's in the category of, it feels like the security stuff needs to be, here's how you secure it, as opposed to, I think some of the docs now make it sound like we're sort of set up by default as Telegram, which is kind of not the, and so you see people come in and have read features about the encryption and the multi-channel and stuff and kind of expect those things are working in the default implementation. And I think we probably need to do a little better job of figuring out what, are we secure by default, or do we have here's how you make a super secure. It's a weird mix because we have hams where you can't encrypt, and people doing a lot of hiking and stuff where really you want people on the channel, right? If there's somebody around, from a safety standpoint, I'm not really trying to keep people out of my channel, right? And then a secure implementation, which in many ways seems more theoretical than anything anybody's really using right now. But I feel like it's pretty prominently featured in the docs versus going hiking.
I think at least for like a sort of like a backup when that isn't working, on the page on the website that if you don't catch that link, because it's appended as a URL query, we can just decode that client side so it never hits the server, so it's secure from that perspective, and we can have like a hidden by default. You click a button to view it, and the user can key in the channel information if they have to. So technically, as long as their browser's secure, which these days, you kind of have to bet that it is, it shouldn't ever hit the server, which we don't control.
Wouldn't that only happen for subsequent requests, though? Like once the SPA is loaded?
So because we use SFR,
the initial URL would still be showing up in the HTTP logs, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of ways we can do it and whatnot, but I mean, if anyone has that much of a concern over having their like channel keys leaked. I think they're the sort of person that would be keying it in with a keyboard.
I think that's a fine concession because I have noticed, kind of like Garth was saying, there is a segment of our user base that are very privacy minded, and they're kind of trying to avoid any sort of interception of anything tangential to Meshtastic, which I think it's probably key that we point out some of the stuff like the analytics that occur within the Android app. And I don't, Garth, I don't know how much in the iOS app that's worth mentioning as well, but like, it's like there's always paper trails to everything. So, there's only so much privacy that we can ensure as an open source product that is consumed in a number of different clients.
I always tell people to just tunnel their crypto over the mesh. Like, you don't control the device, don't let the device decode it.
That's called helium.
Sweet. Are we good on that question?
Yeah, I'd say so.
All right. Home Assistant.
This would take the form of a Home Assistant integration. It would probably consume either the JS or the Python client, probably the Python client.
Python is pretty much the native thing.
Yeah,
for
I've got it installed, but I haven't touched it in a little while. It shouldn't be that hard, basically, as long as you can you construct the UI elements in Home Assistant to connect to the device of a serial. Obviously, you have some sort of retry for reconnections, and then it's just building a UI. It shouldn't really have any bearing on the firmware or anything like that. It's just another client.
And I think this kind of like applies in particular to the things like the environmental plugins, because a lot of and I actually set up a Home Assistant instance quite a while back and since abandoned it, but a lot of it was sort of centered around like taking room measurements of
that and location data.
Yes, absolutely. So I think the environmental measurement plugin is really kind of key to that feature, and we'll have to kind of think about that in not just sort of like node status.
I think the two projects are a good mesh, like no pun intended. But yeah, I get it's just like we need a person that wants to build a Home Assistant integration and support that. It's just
Yeah, I think the
theme here is anything that gets done really needs to be something that someone is passionate about. And unless we have that passion, that feature will fall to the side and not get. We've seen that here. We have their code that just doesn't have someone behind it.
Josh is passionate about this one. I'm super skeptical of Home Assistant and ESP Home, to be honest. I think the Home Assistant could work, but I feel like everybody's approach is I think Home Assistant needs to look at Meshtastic as a whole mesh, and there is one Wi-Fi device that is the bridge between the internet and Home Assistant, or MQTT and Home Assistant in most cases. I think there may be a few cases where people have. I keep seeing this idea that people have like multiple web connected nodes on one mesh, and I'm not implementing that in reality, but I see the discussion and I can't quite see how it works in my head. To me, it's got to hook to the whole mesh, right? Home Assistant to the mesh is the connection, not to like, this is kind of like, I want to talk to the node, all the rest of my IoT devices. And I think you're going to get a bunch of IP traffic and overwhelm the mesh pretty fast.
MQTT is a very almost integral thing, I would say, to Home Assistant. And I'm saying this as a context of messing with it probably 2 or 3 years ago, but it was sort of the glue. for I/O to
How
custom
they did
devices.
everything.
Yeah, yeah. Everything was listening to topics on MQTT broker and either doing stuff directly within Home Assistant or within scripts for that exist within Node-RED and kind of transforming that and then pushing it to Home Assistant. So I I think this is really integral to the MQTT stuff. I don't really see a huge use case for doing this over something like Bluetooth or any other means.
Yeah,
I
I kind of
suppose
agree
you
with you
could
there.
have a USB serial interface that goes over the Python stuff, but I don't know.
So I was having a conversation with he's the one who wrote the. He's actually very passionate about making a bridge over to ESP. If I were to guess, that's going to be his next contribution. And the view is that integration, all it would do would be to enable ESP to have access to any connected IoT devices that are then using Meshtastic as the transport medium. So telemetry, switches, where it's not there for IP traffic. It's just because we have a very robust transport system that can go, 100 kilometers with very little effort. And it's just to get access to what we have provided there on the medium. So I know that he's going to be very passionate about his renovation, and once that's done, I would expect to see an ESP home integration. Right? I see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, if he wants to draft something up, then by all means.
Yeah. So
Not going to stifle innovation.
I mean, I want to see it, right? It's if someone's going to do it and he's passionate about it, let's see it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, whether it's a good idea or not, time will tell, but there's only one real way to do that.
ESP Home or Home Assistant, JM?
ESP
Or
home.
Josh? Because I think Josh opened the Home Assistant brainstorm, and then somebody else requested ESP Home be added in there.
Yeah. What I'm saying is Charles had been working on this, or at least he's got the thought process about this for about 6 months now. And so he is passionate about that.
I'm trying to remember, is ESP Home the device?
Think of it like this. Basically, you'll create a configuration file that'll read sensors and then push data somewhere, and then it just compiles based on the config file. So it's completely headless, doesn't really do anything.
I think I was conflating that with another one. There's so many ESP.
Tasmoda, yeah.
Tasmoda I've done. ESP Easy, I think, is another one. Man, there's so many. Tasmoda was really nice when I was playing with it for the Sonoff devices. I've played with half of this stuff before, but it's just been a while. So it all kind
of so bloody many of them.
There are.
Yeah.
But it is that they do add some of those do add a level of convenience, because I've coded some of these from scratch, like some of my weather, station sensors, and then I'll turn around in 3 months and look at somebody's got a Tasmoda or ESP Home or whatever framework, and it's like, damn, I could literally click through buttons after flashing this firmware. And
I did that with my power meters on solar the other day. I went from some horrible thing I wrote in PHP 8 years ago to a 20-line configuration file.
Yep. Code versus configuration. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not.
Yeah. All right. Oh, we got another question here. KaiOS client support.
Never heard of it.
I don't know what this is.
All right.
I have a Nokia
de-Googleified Android. Even worse, it's Firefox OS fork running a ASOP Yeah,
Haven't
Haven't we
somebody's
had
got
like
to
6
own
Firefox
that.
OSs?
So I think the answer here is similar to our answer to Linux. Be happy to see when it happens.
What's the compatibility layer like? Is it interchangeable or what? Is it just the Google API less version or something else?
No, remember that Firefox OS Ubuntu phone?
Oh
The thing
shit!
that like never
It's-
shipped or whatever.
That was old.
Yeah, I think it's now owned by Ubi Ports.
So wait, Canonical doesn't
owns-
even own it anymore.
Right. No, they jettisoned it out because it was so Unity attached, and they ditched Unity. So,
Yep.
yeah, if somebody wants to spend their whole life doing that, I guess they could, but it doesn't seem like a good time.
The Nokia 800 triggered me because I still have one of these Nokia Lumia 800 Windows phones that I got free courtesy of Microsoft from a hackathon.
Yeah.
Where they were wanting to inflate their app store numbers.
I wrote an
Are they
app that
ARM-based? I don't
never
remember. That was
launched
so long
for
ago.
that thing.
Cool.
Yeah, I wrote 3 apps in 24 hours for their hackathon to get a free phone that I used for about 6 months.
Are they ARM-based? I don't remember.
I don't know exactly what architecture was underneath. The apps were actually pretty easy to write if you're .NET,
Yeah. Snapdragon, like 600 maybe?
Yeah, they were Snapdragon, I think, now that you mentioned it. But yeah, I literally wrote the most base piece of crap apps. Like I wrote a hamburger finder using the Bing Maps API, like just stupid.
I have a PIR sensor coming in the mail, so we can try to fiddle with that. I think Ben had made the point as we were doing some of the sensor accelerometers and probably motion detectors and basically sensor data to work may not be perfect fits for our environmental censoring plugin type stuff. So
yeah, right now it sort of the way it's architected, it lends itself to like polling rather than pushing. So and we can change that. We could even potentially control that with some sort of proto buff. But particularly accelerometers, I think, don't really make a whole lot of sense because that's
I had to think
such,
about
like, a
that,
highly
and yeah,
sampled data.
the only way you could use accelerometers was basically an accumulator. So instead of
Yes.
reporting instantaneous values, you'd accumulate it, and then you can you'd have like a
Process it.
metric of how many samples it was. GPS kind of takes over. You should be able to do interpolation over GPS readings.
Yeah, the only thing I can think about with the accelerometers is if you, like you said, you actually accumulate that data in the background and then you report on it between the periods as like a velocity metric or something for maybe for like the paragliders or sailboat, or like there's some weird use cases, but those are very niche, I feel like, at this point.
Possibly another solution. I think a lot of people want them to detect if it's moving. Rack sells this little vibration sensor now. This little bastard, if you can kind of see it. Basically, you can just read if that thing is activated or not activated. That may be a better solution to trying to poll accelerometer data. A lot simpler.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the external notification plugin could actually support this, right? Right now it is just an output that says if I receive a message icon or message, I will make a beep. An input can be had. If a condition is met, send a message or send the bell or do whatever.
Yeah, a vibration sensor with like a bit of a delay, assuming it doesn't just it triggers after like 3 pulses or whatnot, sends a message. That'd be dead simple.
So, yeah, the external notification, again, that could be better renamed. It would be, I think, at most 15 lines in there to support any kind of IO-based triggered mechanism and do something with that. So if anyone wants to make that change, please go ahead. The plumbing is there.
I think that's all the questions.
That was amazing. 3.5 hours. Yeah!
Hey, it went quick.
Great 1 hour meeting, guys.
Yeah, it sounds like meetings at VMware. Oop, I just did that. All right. Anything else? Any final thoughts?
One thing I thought is maybe we should ask Kevin if he's sick of being spammed on everything. Like his stuff goes straight to his email, right? Like the Discord, and he comments on things. Used to interact with him, go get all excited, commented on an issue. So I don't know if he's got those all filtered into folders or whatever, but that was one question I had for him. Is it if he's
I thought
getting
maybe
kind of hammered by weird notifications as traffic increases?
I thought maybe set up just like a single email on the Meshtastic domain, so it's like a little clearer. Because I mean, like obviously, Kevin started the project. Organizationally, he's at the center of it. But like from a newcomer seeing the Kevin's email, it's like, hang on, what's this? So like maybe just have the general email. We can spin up like a free inbox, or I don't know, whatever we want to use. Maybe just the Meshtastic domain name.
So maybe notifications at Meshtastic?
Yeah, that or contact, or one of the generic names.
Contact at .org that generated email come from. Or maybe do not reply.
Yeah, I do not
Yeah.
reply is probably not bad. That we can use that for shared accounts as well, maybe. I don't know, just some ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, and like that discourse issues bot, right? Like
I was gonna
people
change that, but I
walk
keep
in there
forgetting.
as soon as they see him. Hey, Kevin, haven't seen you for a while, and so
Yeah, I think we should set up a dedicated bot account for that.
Yeah. I do plan on having a conversation with him. He's actually in Hawaii for a bit.
Lucky
He's on vacation. Well, the guy is retired. So he he gets to retire wherever he wants. So I do plan on getting a hold of him for some of these questions. I do want to ask him if he would like to take on the single connection from a client device bug/feature in this time frame. So, because that's coming up, and I think it'd be great to have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth turned on at the same time. So
that one is also intensely technical, and he is, I think, uniquely equipped to handle it.
Yeah, how one dude started this project with pretty much the same scope that we're still running with today.
I've looked at that change, and I understand why the problem is the way it is. And I understand what it takes to fix it. I just don't have the C++ inheritance mindset to get it fixed. It's a tough one.
I also wonder how many devices. What's the max, right? Because is it worth doing if you max out at 2? Like I think the limit is 8 for expressive, right? So that would be the theoretical max. I think 4 is my max that I managed to do with a much less complicated web UI, but 2 years ago. So I guess what that real max is a question I have.
In terms of web, if we were to move to WebSockets, as long as your initial requests aren't sort of all at the same time, you can support quite a lot. The other thing too is I messed around with a Node.js integration, so you'll have a single piece of software connected to the device itself, and you could have unlimited clients connected to that as like a broker.
Mm-hmm. So I think the real bottleneck isn't the number; is going to be the multiplication of received message queue. Because if you have 2 clients, you now need to multiply the message queue by 2. 5 clients by 5, right?
Yeah, you need some logic to be able to limit clients sending messages if there's other, like the ones connected to devices, if they're also choking it up.
I mean, I know one of the conversations he brought up a while back was, part of the mistake was realizing, well, what if you have 2 people in your party and they both have separate Android phones or separate phone, and they both want to participate on the network, and they don't have multiple LoRa radios, right? So each one of them would get their own message. One of them would be their own, but they'd have one device.
Yeah. I guess that sort of behavior kind of lends itself well to the web UI because it's relatively simple to serve to the device. And at least from the protobuf perspective, it's kind of single source, like, you know, if you can stretch your mind in that way. But yeah, I don't see a very easy solution having multiple Bluetooth connected devices.
So that's where we need his gray matter
expertise.
I think some of the ATAC folks have kind of campaigned for similar separation of user node sort of relationship, but that is really counter to the existing model right now.
Yeah, I know that they're trying to a big debacle, but basically they're experimenting with ATAC in the military over here because of certain contracts that got ceased. But yeah, they were messing around with some sort of custom solutions for them, and very much that one user, one device was very pertinent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of follow the ATAC community, and there appears to be made by Auto, who does a number of like hearing protection headset communication type stuff. They actually have what appears to be some sort of 1 watt LoRa based mesh communications device that they're saying is compatible with Meshtastic, but it's another one of those devices that's like contact us for pricing, I think. So it's probably horrifically expensive, and who knows what it actually has under the hood.
Bit of a more to 10,000.
And I've actually heard that, you know, for anecdotally from a number of ATAC users, that the Meshtastic implementation actually has, even with the T-beams, has better range performance than the Gotenna, which is really encouraging to see. It's like $35 hardware and good open source software is pushing out further than proprietary junk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Personally, I'm excited more to see ham radio guys getting into it than the ATAC crowd, but
yeah, such a big community.
And they're passionate.
Yeah, and a lot of those guys are really technical. I've actually got, even at work, a number of ham radio guys on my team. So
Agreed.
Cool.
What a resounding success. Thank you.
I'm surprised how many people tuned in for the whole thing.
My dogs came by a couple. Still in that meeting?
I dropped off for a while, but I came back in.
Yeah. Right on. Well, let's not wait almost 2 years next time. Do this again.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, maybe we'll have
I
this.
would almost argue that we have some sort of schedule, you know, every 6 months or so, maybe.
I agree to that, and I would actually suggest the next time we meet is once we launch 1.3.
That's good. 4 months.
We'll just do a review. Are we missing any?
Sounds
like
good.
A final go, no go for the release, whether we have to push it out like a week or whatnot to fix X bug, or we're good to go.
Something like that. Right on, folks. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
It's great.
Cheers.
Great to see everybody and talk.
Bye.
Yeah. Later.